Okay, folks. Welcome, everybody. I know it's we're running a little bit late, but blame my wife for that. She had me running around Sam's shopping, whatever. The numbers aren't showing up on the bottom of the screen there, buddy. So how's everybody doing this Friday evening? I think people are still trying to get used to us being on Fridays. I'm hoping that's what it is because we're not getting the views like we were when we were on Tuesdays. And I think that Friday was just everybody was like, "Oh, it's Friday," and now, see that light, you can just push it back some. And we just had to get up here, and we are still getting stuff done for this move that we did. It's like, dude, we're oh my gosh. The freeze here in Texas that happened around Christmas. We have fire watches going at the Yin Yang because people let their pipes burst. Didn't take preventative measures even when it was suggested to them. And so now we have to be there. What happens is the sprinkler systems don't work, so the fire department tells you, hey, you have to have a fire watch. Somebody you have to pay to sit there and make sure there's not a fire.
Yeah. Commercial properties like apartments in Texas don't have enough common sense to drain their sprinkler systems right before a freeze. So here in Texas, it freezes and everyone loses their minds.
Mm-hmm.
So
it just happened earlier this year. Pipes usually burst on January, February.
Yeah.
This year it was earlier. Tony will be with us shortly. Where is he?
I don't know. He brought the pizza.
He's so forgettable. I didn't even see him in the chair. I didn't care.
I think he forgets himself.
I was like, Tony's
so out of it.
Oh yeah, that's right. He went and got you guys pizza. Not for me. I can't eat anything like that because I'll turn into a beluga whale. Let them know too that I do this on Friday and I can't be getting called. Folks, we have a show tonight. Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. Patreon.com/PRT podcast. That's how you can donate if you want to help, or you can do the super chat. We take donations. Donations are not expected, but they are appreciated as always. And if you want your comment to be read, I was reminded by my colleagues that if you want your comment to be read, it'll be highlighted if you do a super chat. That's the way to make sure that you're seen and that your comment is seen because it shows up as a big, bright colored thingy. And that way you can get your comment read online. Running a little bit behind. We're letting the chat room fill up a little bit, and we're going to start the show because people are always showing up late. They think I'm going to show up late, so I guess they show up late, so I can't really blame them. But they always tend to show up like an hour late. And they're like, oh, I just got here. And then I've already told 2 stories, and people are telling me that I tell the stories too quickly now. Before, it was like, he's taking too long to tell the stories. And then I started telling the stories, and they're like, well, I'm not in the chat room quick, and, I can't get there, So I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. I'm trying to accommodate people and do what I think that the majority of the audience would want. But so people that get here on time and get here early and start the show, they're like, yeah, get to the stories quickly. Everything all right?
Yeah. That's right.
Other people, of course, that are late, they're like, no, wait, because they're late. So I guess they're always late. Somebody said, how about that one-eyed Dogman BB gun story tonight? Valerie, how do you say your name, Valerie? How do you pronounce it? Geis?
That's a good question.
But no one Geese. Been knowing Valerie for a long time, but don't know how to say her name. Friends on Facebook and social media. Well, here's the thing. The one-eyed Dogman BB gun story was a Linda Godfrey story. So go into her books and see if you can find it. I'm pretty sure she put that into her books. And so her husband, Steve, I'm sure he's taken over for her book sales or whatever. I'm assuming I'm not. What is he doing? Clanging bowls together? Is there a spooky ghost in here? Is there a spooky ghost in here? Clinging bowls? Oh, okay. Just an ugly, weird looking
He
guy.
showed up with Mexican Coke bottles from the gods.
Came out of the sky.
Yeah.
Bonks me on the head.
Yeah. He's gonna start fighting people over possession of it.
The bottle can do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I would prefer somebody that's a Linda Godfrey story. Go and get that story from her archives, her books. So here's the thing. I don't have a problem retelling people's stories, but I got so many stories of my own that I get on the messenger every darn day. I don't need to retell other people's stories. Sometimes it does happen. And I will say this, there are other people from other podcasts who watch my show. If you do watch my show and you're going to retell a story, do me a favor and tell it correctly, because somebody just gave me a version of my story that I covered from my show, a story that we got and that me and Armando fielded, and I covered it, called Beware of Dog. And I don't even know if Armando was still with the show at the time that I told that story on the show, but he helped a little with the research on it. And somebody retold that story recently on their channel, but the person that was giving me the information said that it was not told correctly. They told it, but not, and I don't know, or maybe it was someone else had an encounter like that and they did the story. But to me, that was a very unique encounter. But I'm going to jump right into it. We're almost at 100 people, and I'm sorry that everybody else is running late. That I got to do this because I got a guest coming on tonight, and he's going to be really cool. We're going to have a lot of good discussion. I still don't have any good hot headphones for me tonight. All right, yay. So here's what I'm going to talk about. Shadow people. I had a few stories that I had gotten recently. Not recently, but I went back. And I had a couple friends when I was a teenager. We'll start with this one. And it's I was going to do a show about the weird eyes, and I still might do it. We just haven't had time to do recordings. And the main thing about the recordings is we don't have time to do the editing. And so we're not able to do any recordings right now because I had something slated with Daniel Jones and Nick Redfern, which I was going to try and do a project with them on alien abduction. And we were going to get into all this different stuff, and unfortunately, the move, and then with the freeze and everything else that's happened, I've just had to put that along with everything else on the back burner. The book has about a chapter and a half done, somewhere like that, and I'm not happy with the progress because we're not. It's going to move quickly once I get to a certain point, but I have to get to a certain point, and I have to get these witnesses' stories, which. Some of these people who have these stories, now that it's time to put it in the book, it's like they're ducking and dodging. I mean, come on, you have a story. Why are you avoiding me now? Don't do this to me. I'm trying to write this book. And so I've had to change course on a couple different people and say, look, if you're not going to give me your story, then I'm just going to have to move on. I mean, they've pretty much given the story to me before, but there's updates and other things that need to be put in there. And now I'm having a hard time. I don't understand why it would be any different to be in a book than it would be to be talked about on my show. But apparently it's like, oh, I'm going to be in a book? So when the great internet destruction, when everything falls and the solar flare destroys all of our grid and everything, you mean that it's going to be there for posterity in paper form? Oh, no, sir, it's not going to happen. Sorry. It's like, you can talk about it as long as technology exists, which will be about a couple another days or so. But when the great solar flare hits and we all get fried, our grid goes down. No, I don't want any books with anything that could say that I said that. Ancient civilizations may be able to, one day when we're an ancient civilization in the future, they might find that and say, oh, wow, look at this guy.
Maybe they're trying to save.
Charlie was crazy.
Maybe they're trying to conserve paper and save the rainforest. It's a form of activism.
That's actually not even a joke because one lady asked me if I was going to make my book on Kindle or if I was going to use paper. Mm-hmm. I'm not even joking. I'm not even kidding about it. It's not even a joke.
See, she's saving the world.
Yeah.
Superhero.
But she didn't even have a story. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. She's like, I got a story. And then I'm like, yeah? Nothing. No, I heard a noise in my backyard kind of thing. It was so spooky that an owl was there that flew away.
I mean, she was the story.
It
She
scared the owl. And I'm like, wow. So you're convinced that in your suburban backyard that a dog man jumped over the fence, chased your collie around and around and around for 2 hours until you got home because there were giant footprints. Newsflash, when a dog puts its footprints in the mud and it expands, that's not a dog man. The pictures were very clearly of a 4-legged canine. And I was like, okay, this is not, but apparently, and there was an owl in the backyard that's now terrified because the werewolf was back there.
Poor owl.
So then after not getting this person's story, we'll call her S. She says, you don't have permission to say my name. I said, okay, Shackley. So I was like, okay, y'all probably know who I'm talking about. But anyway, I said, look, all this big buildup, this aggravation and messing with me, then you don't want to tell me the story. And then you start talking about an owl that was there as a guardian or some crap, and somehow you're 1/100th of a Native American of the Bluefoot tribe or something from the Smurf village. Anyway, that owl was an ancestral protector, blah, 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 but now it's been terrified and scared away by a dog man who got into her backyard, and she has 5 neighbors,
It's kind of
which didn't see a darn thing.
Kind of failed as a protector then, didn't it?
Yeah, and then the dog man chased her collie. Well, the collie lived, and it's what I think happened, and I'm just going to lay it out there, and I don't care if this person's mad. We've already said our goodbyes. I think that you dosed your dog with LSD and made it run in the backyard until it was exhausted. Probably didn't do it on purpose, though. In your defense, S, you probably didn't do it on purpose. You were probably out there doing it yourself, and you dropped some of it, and it got into the bowl. And the dog flipped out. I was at a party once as a kid, and I saw a wiener dog run for 3 hours straight, and the little thing, because they did that to it. It was terrible. Finally, I helped calm it down, which I don't know how calm you can be when you're freaking out on your own. But I was like, why is this dog just running? And they're like, oh, it's tripping. Yeah, okay. Well, that's probably what happened. And I wouldn't doubt if this person gave some smoke to the owl too. Who knows? But anyway, long story short, don't use the story, and then goes on this tirade, puts me on blast in a group on Facebook because I'm determined to not make a Kindle of this book because I shouldn't even know whether I'm going to or not. I just told her, I said I had no plans at this time to make it into a Kindle book. I wanted it to be on paperback. And she's like, okay, so you would rather destroy trees.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's too many around.
There's too many trees. They got to go.
They're taking up all our carbon dioxide, man.
We're trying to help kill the rainforest as fast as we can, ladies and gentlemen, because that's the kind of person I am. And I wear tiger's claws because I'm a bad, mean, evil guy. I'm the great evil hunter. I'm Craven. So anyway, that's what I go through right there. And so anyway, whatever, dude. That it's a bunch of BS. It's me stupid argue with somebody. So anyway, years ago, there was an apartment complex. It's got a name now, and we actually do patrol for it. And it is off of I'll tell you right here where it says in Austin, off of Pleasant Valley and Riverside area. If you look on a map of Austin, you'll see Pleasant Valley and Riverside area. Let me see my glasses here.
And it just goes by JFA.
Just read it.
Happy New Year's. Have some Dogman dollars. Anything you can tell us on Shadow People?
We're about to do that. So what happened was there was an abandoned complex. Now, when I moved to Austin in 1991, the only reason that I would walk down that part of Pleasant Valley, because it was rough even back then, was to take the bus to an even rougher area where I used to box, Metropolis Recreation Center. So I used to go down there to go train, and so I would walk because if you took a bus from or outside of my apartment complex where I live with my mom, I had to go. It went all the way down Willow Creek and all the way up and then around, and it was like an extra half an hour. I was like, I could just walk 5 minutes and go. And so I'd go to the bus and literally save 30, 40 minutes of time. and got a little exercise. Typically, I'd run. Yes, there was a time when I ran, and there was an abandoned apartment complex right there on Pleasant Valley back in 1991. Now, eventually, they revamped it and they did something with it. And I think by 1996 or 97 is where they did something with that complex, and it became whatever. And now it's back to being a thriving poop hole, and people are getting shot there all the time. But it's not a good place. But I used to either walk down the street with my two friends that were my neighbors, and we would go down to the HEB, which is the local grocery store. And back in 1991, when I first moved here, and that was like October, November, something like that, they had the Street Fighter II arcade game down there. Now, that came out in 1991, and so it was a big deal. So we would actually walk all the way from our apartments to we'd sit there and talk and walk. Well, one night when we were walking, I remember hearing, and this was about a year removed from when I had my Dogman encounter, so I was a little leery. I didn't want to walk alone, but when I would walk by that abandoned apartment complex, I would always walk on the other side, and I didn't want to be out there late at night. So somebody says, "Thanks again for the sweatshirt. The 4X fit perfect. Thanks for the book too. Cheers, David Buckles." Okay, you're welcome, David. He was one of the winners, folks. From a couple weeks ago. So anyway, I was walking and I heard something weird one time. Like I heard, it was back when homeless people weren't everywhere like they are now in Austin. In Austin, they are everywhere. Like I could go outside right now. There's probably 2 or 3 hanging out outside my office. And they're shaking their cup saying, change. And if you give them change here in Austin, 10, 20 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, you wouldn't get attacked. Now you might. And I'm going to click this over to y'all. If you think, am I joking? I want to see your reactions to this.
No,
No, I mean,
they're like strays. You give them a little, and they keep coming back for more.
not only that, but they'll act indignant.
No, they're. I'm talking about how dangerous they are.
No, they'll be like, "Oh, you're giving us like $13. Oh, that's not enough for me."
I gave one of them $50 on the corner of
It doesn't
the
matter.
hall the other day, and that was like nothing.
Yeah, and
If
the
you
news
see-
doesn't even. It never makes the news. Like how the homeless people will just attack tourists or just anybody. There's robberies, there's murders, there's aggravated assaults, rapes,
Sexual assaults.
yeah, all the time.
Yeah, the
You
theft
mean-
is through the roof. But that's that's
They have full camps, and it's just insane.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean-
They
like-
shoot at our guards.
And the scary thing is, it's like it's nothing new. Like every city will have something like this, but it's different in Austin, and because they're allowed to roam free, so they have like this attitude that comes with them as well. That
Yeah.
just makes it annoying to deal with.
Yeah, they're bad.
Yeah, and they're dangerous now. And I'm not saying that where you're from, you might have homeless people who were homeless. They have it's unfortunate. They're homeless for a reason. I mean, maybe something happened. They got evicted or something. They lost their job. There's a lot of good homeless people. They're just homeless, and it's sad. It's unfortunate. But that's not really what's happening. When you look at what's happening here, it's a different ballgame. But back in 91, they weren't as prevalent. You had homeless people. I got attacked back in 1990, mid 90s. When my buddy Greg was working at Mr. Getty's, and I used to be a pizza delivery driver for a while, and so I let him use my car for the night, and I went ahead and walked back to the apartment, and which wasn't that far, about 2 blocks, and I had 3 homeless guys jump me for a pizza. Now, what ended up happening was they didn't get the pizza, but neither did I. Just
Yeah.
leave it at that. So what ended up happening, my friend, we used to walk by this abandoned complex. I heard somebody clear the throat, making noise, and I look up and I don't see anything, except for I thought I saw something shadowy on and the way that this apartment complex was, it was almost like a motel, the way they'd have like the long the hallway with the doors, to each room, and then the bottom was the same way.
Yeah.
And so I thought I saw somebody up there, and it was just crazy, dude. Like I was like, they moved really quickly, and I was like, what was that? Now this is back before I had worked in these haunted buildings, had lived in a haunted house, had a few little encounters when I was younger, but so I wasn't real adept at like spotting or being totally aware I've got an uneasy feeling, and I felt like there was something there. And where I needed to catch the bus was on that side. But I walked to the other side just because it freaked me out. And so I just waited. And then when I saw the bus coming, I ran across the street and got on the bus. And from that day on, I never walked in front of that complex. And then one time I was with my friends. We were going down the street to play Street Fighter, which didn't require getting on a bus. And we were walking, and my one friend, Chad, said, "Look, I see somebody up there." And he said that he thought he saw like a quick, like black, dark flash. And I thought, could be something, might not be, Well, one night my friends were walking, and I was out of town or whatever, playing sports, whatever I was doing. I don't remember exactly. But they were walking one night down to play the Street Fighter because the H-E-B closed at midnight, which back in 1991, the H-E-B stayed open later than it does now, which is totally ridiculous. It's asinine. Yeah. Now they close at 11 o'clock because just because. It doesn't have anything to do with anything other than just because. Now, that's how it is. So 11 o'clock, everything shuts down, which is ridiculous, but that's what they do. And so back then, though, they could go up until midnight, and it was like a Friday night. And so they were walking by that complex, and they look up, and they see somebody standing on the balcony, which is like I said, this long balcony, and then there's this bottom row, whatever, and then the apartments, but it's got a fence around it, and it's abandoned. And so they look up and they see somebody with the way they described the person was pretty detailed. They had like shaggy hair, and it looked like a guy like holding onto the railing, leaned over the railing, and he was very tall. His head was almost touching the ceiling of the awning, and he had yellow glowing eyes. Now, I recently talked to a friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and I said, describe to me the yellow glowing eyes once again, because refresh my memory. This, you told me this story back in 91, 92, something like that. And so tell me what this was. And he said, dude, no, it wasn't a yellow like you see, like somebody's eyes are yellow, like they were reflective, like an animal. You see the light and there's a yellowy hue to it. Or somebody who's got jaundiced eyes. No, it was self-illuminating, bright yellow eyes. So no orange. He didn't say orange. I said, was there any orange tint to it? No, it was yellow. And so whenever I asked for a description of the being, it was a shadow being. I absolutely, when I look back on it now, I know for 100% that it was a shadow being that we would consider to be a shadow person. It was very black, just solid black. There was no color to the clothing other than black, and the hair. And the hair was kind of flowing, and it was like they could see it moving. My one friend, Jay, said that it looked like, kind of like Medusa's hair, like how Medusa's hair moves around in Clash of the Titans, but black, and there was no, it was just, thank you for that donation, Hussein and Amy, both of you who donated. Thank you so much.
Like its hair was alive on itself?
Yeah, like the hair was moving by itself. That's interesting because in the next story, you're going to see something, a correlation. That's why I went back to ask them about, well, one of them anyway, about this story and to get confirmation of exactly what it was that they saw. And after that, they were scared to death. And they said that this person was making, and get this, there was a rattling, hissing noise coming from the direction of this being. And so they ran down to the H-E-B, and then, of course, they were afraid, so Chad called his dad, come get them. After they were finished playing Street Fighter, they didn't want to walk back up there. They could have walked all the way down to where the movie theater was, because there used to be a movie theater there. I don't think there is now. And then, y'all know where that's at, too. Like, there's the H-E-B across the street. It used to be... what's that grocery store that nobody goes to? Albertsons.
Oh, yeah. It's all the rotten food.
Yeah. So, and then there was the H-E-B. Now there's the H-E-B, and then they have the gas station with the H-E-B, and then there's, I think the Mr. Getty's is still there, and there's like a Taco Bell and all that.
Oh.
And then you go up, that right there, yeah. And Club Carnival or Club Carnival, that where my mom's friend used to go like every weekend and was always trying to get her to go out dancing or whatever. And the one time she does, she actually meets my stepdad, and he was actually a really good guy. And she was married to him for years. So you can actually meet someone good at a dance hall, but she ran him off. But anyway, guy was a great guy. I liked him a lot. His name was Lucio. And shout out to him if he's still around. I haven't seen him in years. But anyways, so instead of walking all the way down and then going up, now the problem was being a teenager and walking up those streets, there were gangs back then. And I'm not joking. I'm not talking about, like little kiddie bullcrap. No, there was a little arcade right in there, and they had kind of taken it over. And the gang that hung out there, and I know, Scorpion, you're in the chat, you can attest to this, they were Latin Kings. And so if you walk through there, and this was a white kid and a black kid.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was kind of cool with some of them. So if they were with me, it was okay. But wasn't going to be okay probably. So they didn't want to take that chance. So they had to have their dad come. So that's how afraid they were to walk back up the hill to avoid that.
Talk about a
happened.
rock and a hard place.
Yeah. So it's either hang out
With a demon lady, demon
demon
shadow.
thing, or face possible getting beaten, shot, stabbed, whatever by a gang. So it was not a good situation, and it was not a. Hold on one second, folks. I got a message. This is work, folks. I can't. I'm sorry. This sucks, but I had to do this. So it was a very scary thing that happened to these people, and it ties into something that I needed to another story that I needed to get out. This story involved something that happened in, and I went back and I looked, and I thought it was Maine, but it was actually Massachusetts. This was back in 1997, and they were, I believe he said, 11 years old, something like that, when they moved into this house. And it was an old New England style house, whatever. And one of the things that this person said was, like, they had never had, up until that point in their lives, any sort of ghost encounter, nothing. Like, nothing had ever happened. They weren't into Bigfoot or nothing. Nothing ever. They weren't into monsters. It wasn't like they had an active imagination. In fact, he described himself as kind of a dullard. He said, I was kind of a dullard. I just didn't have much, I wasn't into much of anything. Sports, and it kind of took up most of my life, is what he told me. And back then, this person said that they moved into this house, and like I said, they were about 11 years old, or I could be wrong. I think they said they were 12. There's 12. Because I know that they lived there till they were 16. 12 was 4 years. They lived there for 4 years. And they got a big room, like there were 5 bedrooms to this place, and there were 3 kids, and then the parents. So one bedroom was unoccupied, that ended up being just full of junk, like overcrowded with storage and stuff like
yeah.
that. But apparently his parents were. Somebody says, Hussein says, "Beware of Dog" was one of my favorites. Yeah, that's a good story. The people that it happened to are very reputable people too. But anyway, he said that got to the point where they needed the more storage space, so they started using a huge closet. And his dad was pretty smart. His dad was literally an architect, and so he started to look at the plans of the house. And I remember him telling me that he had come across the closet. There was a space in the back of the closet, and his dad kind of knocked on it one day and said, And so his son goes to the back of the closet out of curiosity and starts to knock on it, and he noticed that he heard like an echo. When he's walking back out of the closet, he saw his dad do it. His dad says, so he leaves, He goes and does it. He comes out of the closet. He hears 2 knocks coming from the back wall of the closet. So he freaks out. He runs downstairs. He tells his dad. His dad's friend is there, and his uncle's there, and he's like, "There's something in my closet." Blah 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 blah. His dad's like, "Yeah, there's a room back. There's something back there." The closet, according to the plans, should be
Deeper.
further back,
Yeah.
and so they decided the very next day, which was a Saturday, according to this guy. He said it was the weekend, so they said, "Hey, well," his friends came back, and his dad's buddy was a contractor, so they came back the next day, and so they cut the wall out, removed the wall, and they found a little room. The little room was shaped like an L. He said you walked in, and there was kind of a little bit of space right here to the right, but then to the left, there was like this long little, area. He said it was about 7-8 feet, which is pretty deep. And it was about 3 or 4 feet, in, and then 7-8 feet to the left, and about 1.5 feet, 2 feet to the right. And he said, that the area to the left, there was only one object in that area, whatever, and it was a chair. That's all that was there. He said it was a chair that looked like it was from, the olden times. Now, this person isn't really hip on antiques, and neither am I. I don't know how old this chair is. But he said that this thing looked like it was from the olden times. Now, of course, this person was born in the mid-'80s. I'm older than they are, but, 10 whatever years old they are. So olden times could be
1920s,
could be from the
1800s.
70s. I don't know. When I was born, I'm an old man. So I'm thinking, okay, so they found a chair. What's the big deal? He said, well, they noticed. He said when they pulled the chair out, they just kind of looked at it and they were like, that's all that's back there, just a chair. And he said there was spider webs and stuff all in there or whatever. And then they took the chair, cleaned it off, and then they just left it sitting in his room. And then he's got this closet with this big opening now.
And a chair.
And a chair, and he's sitting there going like, gee, thanks. You just left me with whatever in the hell wants to come out of that closet, And so he was freaked out. And the chair, he started messing with it, and he started noticing it was sticky. And he said that, he goes, dude, this chair, he's like, it was an old chair. He goes, but, it was like you could tell that there were marks on where the chair had handles, like you sit, like your handles, like hands or whatever. And then he said on the front legs of the chair, it was sticky. So that would mean what? Tape.
Yeah, I was trying to think like
Somebody was taped to that chair. I mean, It's as simple as that. I mean, we started talking about it, and he said, what do you think? I said, I think somebody was taped to the chair because, there's a pattern there on both sides where the arms would have been and where the legs would have been in front of this chair. And I thought, wow, that's crazy. So he says, dude, I went to bed, that night, and he goes, I had a weird dream that someone was in that back room screaming, and that there was a man that was laughing. And then he goes, it was a terrifying dream, but it was just a dream. So I go to school, whatever, it was like Sunday night or whatever. He had that dream. Next day he goes to school, and he's got this weird, just sick feeling that something is wrong, He went to the bathroom because he was sick to his stomach in the elementary school he went to, or in the middle school, whatever. And he goes to put water on his face. He feels sick, and he looks up, and for a split second, he thinks he sees like something standing behind him, but he couldn't. It was so quick, he couldn't make it out. So that night, he goes home, which would have been the Monday night after they opened the door, or opened the closet, whatever. So they hadn't even been there a month when they discovered this, and it was like maybe 3 weeks. And so he said that up to that point, though, there was nothing that he could remember that was unusual or peculiar. And so obviously this triggered whatever this was. Here's what happened. He goes to bed Monday night. In the middle of the night, he wakes up to somebody making a gurgling sound. I don't know. He didn't give me a gurgling sound, but a gurgling sound I can assume was like or something like that. I don't know. And he said that he wakes up and he sees this person sitting in that chair. Now, he said it was dark in his room, and he could see that the curtains had been opened, and there was like this light of the moon coming in. And he could see this dark figure sitting in that chair. Now, interesting enough, the room that had all of the stuff that had been stored in there, that's the only other place that had any activity up to this point. And him and his siblings, his older brother, his older sister, he was the youngest. They didn't like to go in there to grab anything for their parents. They didn't want to go in there. They didn't want to deal with it. It was like, you go in there, you go in there. And there was an old mirror in there. And his older sister claimed the next day after he saw this figure, he said he was half asleep. So he just kind of went back to sleep and just discounted it, thought he was dreaming, whatever. His sister said that she went in there to get something out of one of the boxes for his mother. And she saw what looked like a haggard old woman, or like, not old, didn't say old, but like a woman who looked like she was emaciated in the mirror. So it freaked her out, and she ran out, and it's like, oh my gosh. Well, the next day after that, he said it was like, this was the second day after, he had the weird dream or whatever. He said, dude, I see these orangey yellow eyes. He's like, we're going to lay down to go to sleep. He wasn't asleep yet, and he saw this orangey yellow eyes on the side of his bed. And that's all he saw was just the eyes. And he's like looking, and he's like trying to make it out. And he's like, what am I looking at here? What is that? And then he goes, those are eyes. And then he said that he could see from the light of the outside that the hair was moving.
Oh,
and he was like, oh, and he's like, as it came into focus, because he said, I wore glasses. I grabbed my glasses, and I was almost too terrified to put them on. He goes, I'm literally like scared. He goes, because I know whatever this is going to come into focus better. So he says he's shaking, and he's like, I remember shaking, and just when I put them on, he's like, I see it clearly. It's a black, shadowy figure, and it's like a woman. Okay, wasn't extraordinarily tall or anything like that, but it was a shadowy figure on the side of my bed with yellow glowing eyes. And he said, and I know those were eyes because I saw it blink, like boom, boom. Then he hears like this sort of gurgling noise, like, I can't do it. I don't know. He kind of did when he typed it out, he kind of did it how it did, and I tried to repeat it. I couldn't do it. And then he says that this thing, he starts to get off the bed so he can run because he says he had a queen size bed, and which was a luxury for a kid, to have that. He says, I'm sleeping on the far right side, so I'm closest to the door so I can run if I need to. And he says that as soon as I start to even think about getting off the bed, this thing starts to run around the other side of the bed. And he said at that point, he goes, dude, my heart sank, and I thought, okay, now it's going to come. And then so he decided to try to roll to the other side of the bed. So then the thing just starts to crawl onto the bed with him. Mm. And it is a black, shadowy figure. And he says, I can't get a bead on it. And he goes, just then I hear a knock on my door, and it's his cousin, or his sister's friend and her cousin. These two girls that were friends with his sister, they were cousins. They were cheerleaders. And she's like, you're going to be late. And he looks up, and it's daylight. And it's like 8 a.m. or something like that. And he said, dude, it was like 3 or 4 a.m. when this started. And so he thought, where did the time go? So he had this weird sort of missing time,
right,
involving this shadow entity. And another thing happened after that too. This is one of the really disturbing. He said he was about 14 when they finally moved out of there. He traded rooms with his older brother, and it stopped for him. But his older brother had some stuff happen, but his older brother had a habit that kind of precluded him from really giving a crap about stuff like that. And so because he smoked all the time.
Oh, okay.
So he's like, his brother was like a burnout, and his friends would come over and they'd be partying and stuff. And, and so, but there was a weird thing that happened to his brother. Now here's what happened. Because he lived in a haunted house basically, but it was just centered around that particular area. He said that one of his brother's friends was in the chair, and they were making fun of him for saying that he thought that somebody had been taped up to that chair. So his brother's friend, he's one of those like, yeah, shaggy hair, hey, yo, guy, He gets in the chair and goes, oh man, I'm chained to the chair. And literally something flipped him up out of the chair and threw him on the ground and broke his tailbone.
Zoink, Scoob.
Yeah, and so that ended up happening. And he goes in there and he's in the hallway and him and his sister go in there because they hear this thud and this scream, and his brother and his brother's friends are laughing at this guy who got dumped out of the chair, not even thinking that this was a supernatural occurrence. And then everybody, he said, kind of at one time just kind of stopped laughing, and they were like, "Whoa, did that just happen?" Like, and then his brother's friend, who I think he says his name was Brent or something like that, is laying there holding his tailbone, crying. So then his mommy had to come get his burned out ass so he could go and get his tailbone looked at.
Glad he got his.
Yeah. Anyway, the way he talked about that guy too is like he's not a good guy, but it has nothing to do with the show. But anyway, the story. They go to move. And by the time they moved, I think he said he was like 16. He lived there from the time he was 12 to he was 16. And when they were loading up their vehicles, he goes, "I was taking the last box of stuff out of there." And he goes, and there was still some stuff there, but the dad said, "Hey, I'm going to come back up and I'm going to come and, with some friends and we'll get the rest of what's left." There was still some stuff, there. He walks outside carrying the last box. He sets it down in the back of his dad's friend's truck. He turns around, he looks up, and he sees, looking down at him in broad daylight in that window, a black shadowy figure with orangey yellow eyes just staring down at him. And it was like he could see the hair moving around, And I asked him about that, and he said it was like if somebody were to have drowned, that's
so like their hair is
their
just
hair was
constantly
okay.
flowing.
Like
Yeah.
that's what it
water.
looked like. Now, here's a weird thing. Alex doesn't have the mic or anything.
Hang on.
Dude, you
Okay,
have to sponsor
before you move on, I have a question. So, the whole time they were living there, they never saw fit to throw this chair away or the mirror?
He tried to throw it away, according to him, but he's a kid.
Uh-huh.
And his mom's like, "No, you're not throwing that chair away." So she stopped him with no explanation. So the chair sat out in the hallway for a while too.
Like, what kind of chair is it? Like a wooden?
Dude, I don't know. I don't work at IKEA, dude. I don't freaking know. It's just he just said it was a chair, from the olden times. I didn't see a picture of it. So anyways, the chair sat out in the hallway. At one point, he told me that he put the chair out there and that it ended up back in the room. And he didn't know whether or not it was a human being putting it back in the chair or if something was putting it in the chair. I have no idea. But
Jeez. Well, thanks, Mom.
yeah, and then his mother
Great
wouldn't let him
idea.
throw it away. Well, kids need to be doing what their parents tell them, but with something like that, maybe it's better to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission.
Yeah.
Because I would have just thrown that thing away. Oh, man. It's another hazard of doing this on Fridays. So much work. Did that get everywhere?
No.
Oh, thank goodness. So anyway, that's that story, and yeah, he actually gave me another story about a house that he lived in later on in Connecticut when he was older, when he was like in his early 20s. His brother had gotten into a real bad car accident, but it didn't involve, and I'll tell that story at another time. It didn't involve shadow people or anything like that. So I'm going to switch over. Alec has a story. You were working just recently on a Firewatch, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let me pan over to you. So this is Alec, and Alec, really good friends with his parents, and your dad had remodeled his house. I remember back when you were, how old, 12, 11? When
Not
you
sure.
guys were on, what is that, off of Lamar?
Yeah, I was in second grade.
You were you were that young? I thought you were still in Cherry Loop at that time.
No, because I remember breaking my arm around in second grade.
Well, you broke your arm at Cherry Loop.
Yeah,
At the tree,
The
yeah.
first time, but
The
I
first
broke
time.
my other arm in second grade.
Jeez.
And I hate to laugh about it, but Alec, we were telling you not to climb that tree, and you were hanging from it, and then you fell and broke your arm, and then we ended up at the hospital. So, I'm not laughing at you about that, but you guys moved into a house that had a bad history. And what street was that?
Dexter Street.
Dexter, that's right. And so when your dad had an incident that happened at that place when you guys were moving, and something tried to talk to him through the window. And I remember that, and I remember that there was something in your room because you had the first room when you walked in to the left. Remember?
Yeah.
And that room, there was something there, and your parents were convinced that there was something there, and your dad had told me that he thought that there was something wrong with that place. But it, you had a cool family, good energy, and so there was not. When I went there, I didn't feel anything.
Yeah, and the whole house was completely remodeled by my family. Like my dad did a lot of it himself, and then I even helped with some of the breaking of the drywall and stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and it was it turned into a duplex. You guys, yeah. And I remember it was a pretty nice little deal. You guys had a loft up there. The only time that something ever happened when I was there, and it was near the bathroom. And when you walk into the bathroom area, there was like something there. And I remember, I think it was one of your little sisters saying that she saw like a shadow there that scared her. But other than that, I don't, now when you were there, did you have any encounters there?
not that I can remember.
Not that you can remember, because I remember you did, but you were little, like you were you were a young kid, and your sisters were tiny. And I remember your dad saying that there was something that had happened, or your mom too. I can't remember if it was just one or both of them, saying that something had happened to you and you didn't want to sleep in that front room. Now, I don't remember what exactly it was, but you're not prone to having.
I vaguely remember something like that. It was probably a night terror. Because
Yeah, you
I
had night terrors pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you didn't. So I was wondering, because here recently you just had an encounter, and this was only a few days ago when you were doing a fire watch for me at one of our properties. We can't say where it's at because it's a huge company, and they probably don't want us talking about that. But you were doing a fire watch downtown near Town Lake,
Mm-hmm.
and tell the audience what happened, and then we'll get into your encounter that happened to you in Hawaii.
Well, I was just sitting there waiting for the shift to end, and I was kind of staring off into the distance, and I was kind of looking, up above the ground, and then all of a sudden I saw this entity. It wasn't just an entity. It was a person. It seemed like, and they were very animatedly, kind of talking about something, and I don't remember exactly what they were saying, but it was very clearly a person that was like right in my vision in front of me, and then by the time it went away, it hadn't even registered to me that there was something there in the first place. And it was pretty interesting.
And you said that this thing that you saw, which is funny because when we were talking about the show and what I had planned, it was interesting that you and me were sitting here talking, and he talked about this person looking like they were from a shipwreck.
Yeah, that's how I could explain it, not because of their clothing or anything, but just the appearance reminded me of something that would be like growing coral. It looked like those people from the Pirates of the Caribbean that are stuck on the ship.
Was their skin like pale and discolored and blue, or
Not so much. It was
like
just
someone
the
drowning?
overall look. It looked like he was from underwater or something weird. Or from a ship at the least, out of sea.
That's totally freaking weird. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you, and here's the interesting thing. That whole area right there used to be two different complexes, and I'm not going to give the names of them, but one of them my brother used to live at, and then another one, a really good friend named Dominic, who was me and your dad's really good friend, who I met through your dad at the gym. We were gym rats. We'd all hang out. Dark Sea, thank you for that donation. That's incredible.
Oh,
$50. Wow. You said, what up from Dallas, Texas?
Very
Dallas,
generous.
Texas. Go Cowboys. But that whole area was really bad. There's a complex that's still there now that has been there, and they've revamped it and remodeled it and everything else. I don't know why they didn't just knock it down. It probably cost more to remodel it than knock it down. But that complex, I was working there one night with a friend of mine named Robert Padron, and this guy got shot in the gut. I heard bang, bang, bang. The guy comes around the corner and he's holding his side. This is back in the mid to late 90s. I can't remember what year it was, 96, 97, something like that. And the guy had gotten shot, and he walked right up to us, and then he sat on the steps. And then when the cops came, they picked him up and got him to the hospital. I don't know whether he lived or died. I didn't work it but a couple nights, and then I requested to not be there because there was some serious stuff going on, and it was like a family, like two families feuding, and they were like shooting each other, and there was, I just was like, dude, this is ridiculous. I was already getting paid more to work at my other hood job to do another hood that I was more familiar with, so I asked to be transferred back to my hood, where I knew who was killing who and why. But anyways, that job right there was very dangerous. And so that area, literally where we sit over there doing that job, there's no telling what was there before. I know that there were apartment complexes that were there that were really bad, like really bad stuff. A lot of drug dealing, prostitution, people getting killed, gang activity, just people squatting in them, and you name it, it was bad. And I delivered pizza in that area too, and one of our drivers got robbed pretty much right there where y'all would be sitting. And so there is no telling what that spirit was or why it was there. But I'll say this. I know that there is a very, very, very dark, evil, bad energy in that place, in that area. And I've walked through the hallways of both of those sister properties over there. And let me kind of pan back to me. I've walked through the hallways, and at one time when I was on the sister property of that one, I know y'all know where it's at. It's just right around the corner.
Yeah.
And I was walking through the hallway, and I heard somebody clear their throat, and I was there by myself, and I turned and I looked, and there was nobody there. And I know Kim, our patrol girl, she's been on, our patrol captain, she's been on our show and talked about some stuff, and she's got tons of stories. She should write a book. Not kidding. She should write a book just based on the ghost encounters she's had doing security just for us. Paul Deal, thank you for that donation. Paul Deal, $19.99. I appreciate that. And one of the things that's weird about that is that when Kim came on the show, she talked about how and why she had that ability, and that was because she died giving birth to one of her daughters, and when she was resuscitated, she was brought back. That's when she had this gift to be able to see things or whatever. But that area, it doesn't surprise me that you had that area. Now we're out of time. I gotta call my guest, but you had an encounter in Hawaii, and when we do the show next time, we're going to talk about that. We need to get on there and talk about this, and it involved a shadow entity. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now and I'll just say that was on the Big Island, right?
Yeah, right below Waikoloa Village.
Yeah. And when you lived in Hawaii, we've talked about this too. You said that the what is it, the Menehune?
Oh, yeah, they talk about the Menehune.
Menehune, that's right.
They're just one of the many local legends there.
Yeah. That's another interesting thing, and I believe I may have touched on that with Kevin when Kevin was on the show, Kevin Panay. And he was at the conference, and prayers go to Kevin. Hopefully his foot's healing up. Also, my friend Loki, who had surgery, and that he's okay. And please pray for my friend Max, who had a heart attack. Yeah, so you were pretty up to snuff on some of the legends and the local lore of Hawaii, but what you saw that night, which we're not going to get into it, but it was pretty interesting. So we're going to talk about that next week, folks. Stay tuned for that. So, all right. So you can go back to the deal, and Tony can bring him his goofy self back over here. So I'm going to give a call to a very interesting guy who I've been friends with for a couple years. He's got a show, and he's pretty good at what he does, and he needs more exposure. I can tell you that because he's had a conversation with him earlier, and he's just a fun guy to talk to, and I like talking to him. And we're gonna switch over and call this man. If I can get it on here, let's see here. Folks, if you send me a friend request on Facebook, please do me a favor and let me know that you are a fan of the show. Okay? Because otherwise, I don't know who you are. And people are like, well, you never approved my friend request. I've been saying this on the show forever to please let me know. Let's see if I can get this going here. Bear with me, folks. Technology. It's wonderful. There we go. Okay. Hello?
Hey, what's going on, brother? How are you?
What's going on, Rob? Okay, people at home, can y'all hear Rob good? Because I'm not hearing him very good on my but that could just be my headphones.
I had you on in the background too, so I was double booked. It was coming in double
Yeah, they
time.
can hear
So
Rob good.
Okay, good. So, Rob, say hello to the audience here. Rob Yox, ladies and gentlemen. Rob, where are you from?
I'm from New York, where we have a show called Full Spectrum Universe on YouTube. We delve in everything from spirituality, hidden histories, consciousness, Bigfoot, alien encounters. I mean, just the gambit. We run the gambit. It's a somewhat of a variety show. We like to. Right now, we've been focused on spirituality because of a lot of the Hopi prophecy was leading up to the winter solstice of this year. So we decided to really hyper focus on that. We also, we touch on a lot of galactical information too, which is here and there, none of which has been proven 100%, but there is a definite line of thought when we talk about energies and energy matrices and things like that. So it's been absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and I've seen your show. Folks, is my audio, somebody said that they need to turn my audio down. You did? Okay. I don't want to sound too loud over Rob here, but you have a great voice, Rob, and I enjoyed listening to your show, and I watched you, and you talk about some very interesting things. You talk about some things that it piqued my interest, and I thought this guy would be a good guest to come on the show. You seem to be on the level, and so I just wanted to bring you on the show, and we could talk about some different things. Now, what you're talking about with the Hopi prophecy, that's very interesting. I know what you're talking about, but can you explain to the audience what you're referring to?
Absolutely. So the Hopi prophecy is based upon the Great River, right? So the Great River is essentially a slow streaming river. And what happens is the Hopi believed that one day the world or the river itself would split. And what happens is one side of the river will stay slow and the other side will speed up. Well, modern spirituality has kind of it's sort of conceptualized this into what we know as the Great Awakening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Great Awakening are high vibratory people or high frequency people that are essentially going to be on this journey of ascension, and it's going to enlighten the world. And then there are those who are going to stay in the slow moving river and stay at the lower vibratory end of emotion and consciousness, which essentially is fear, loss, pain, anxiety. And then, of course, there's those who embody the love side, and they'll stay on the fast flowing river. And what's going to happen is it goes further into the split of worlds. And those lower frequency people are going to remain in a three-dimensional world, while the fast flowing river and the higher vibratory people are going to end up to going to almost a new world, or a fourth dimensional world, or a fifth dimensional world. And once that split happens, and I truly believe that we are in the beginning of that split, we see it in society. It's absolutely insane how some people can be literally sleeping but walking around doing a 9 to 5 day-to-day job, and
Yeah.
then there are those who are vastly awake to the deceptions and things that are going on out there, and people not being who they're supposed to be, and not saying and doing things they're supposed to do, without going into too much detail. But those people will, once you that split happens, those people will not interact anymore. And a lot of that has to do with the ascension process. And once you sort of access the information that's already inside of you, there's not going to be a whole lot of conversation with the people who are not somewhat on the same path. Now, that portion of it, I am 50-50 with. I truly believe that, what my show and what we're doing right now is we're trying to branch out to those people who are sleeping. And I like to call it a threshold. Everybody has a threshold where they start to question things, especially in the paranormal and, supernatural world. Most people won't decide to really do research or really dive in deep unless they have an experience or some sort of trauma that brings them to that point. What we're trying to do in my channel is we're trying to really gauge people with questions that kind of question their reality and question everything that they see and know around them. And once we sort of turn their world upside down a little bit, it leads them to want to do their own research or follow their own path and line of information. And then the great part of that is everybody's perspectives all come back to the whole or the community. And what we do at that point is we explore all of them, and we all become better for it, because we're really diving into, a lot of people have their own sort of, I guess, niche in these communities. So if we can bring everybody with all the different niches together, we have a complete, more robust understanding of all of it, right? So that's
Mhm.
kind of where we stand with the information portion of it. And the Hopi prophecy is something that we've been celebrating on the winter solstice for the last 3 years, getting ready for this specific split. And my friends from Australia, Stephen and Evan Strong, it's their summer solstice and it's our winter solstice. And I'm going to bring them up a little bit later too, because they have a Yowie encounter that I want to talk to you guys about, because I know that you guys love Dogman and Sasquatch and things like that. So I have some material on that as well. But that's my understanding of the Hopi prophecy.
I can't stand Dogman. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Man, you stupid, Rob. What you talking about? No,
Oh,
seriously, you
man.
do a good job, man. And tell the folks what the name of your show is right now.
It's called Full Spectrum Universe, and it's on
Full s-
YouTube. You can just either Google it, you can put it into the YouTube search bar, it'll come right up. We've had some pretty big names come through. A lot of people who are on Ancient Aliens. I was actually featured in Paul Anthony Wallace's Echoes of Eden as well, which is a book that uses the contextualization of Catholic religion to sort of dive into the extraterrestrial phenomena as well, which is truly he is one of the reasons that I am where I am today, because of all the work that he has done. He has been like a mentor to me,
He's
and I
amazing.
helped him research that book out, and it was incredible.
He's amazing. I'm good friends with Paul Wallace, and he's been on my show, and we've had multiple conversations, and he never fails to impress me with his deep dives and his work. And so many people try to discredit him because he's he's upturning people. Like, I don't know how do you, what are the words? He's making people question things. And people don't like to question their reality. They want the nature of their reality to be this mundane. And like me and you were talking, Rob, about the non-playable characters, like the the NPC, the
NPCs.
NPCs, and they walk around and they just look up like, and you're like the drooling. You can't. There's nothing you can do with these people. You try to talk to them, and they don't want to do anything. It's like a societal problem. You can't get them to conform to anything of any true value. It has to have something in it for them that they can see that's tangible, that's like, as you say, in this third density, third dimensional, whatever. That's what they want. They can't, if they can't sink their teeth into it in a physical sense, they don't care about it. They don't want it. And I was told not too long ago by a good friend of mine's mother's, Tony's is right here with me. His your grandmother on Chad, your step grandmother. She told me one day, and it just kind of alleviated some angst in me. She said, "Don't bother trying to find your people, your students. They'll come to you." And so I felt kind of relaxed after that, and I'm like, you know what? She's right. I don't need to chase people around and try to make them listen. If they don't want to listen, it's up to them. Because there is a shift happening and there is an awakening happening, and you're given all the tools that you could possibly need or want to do and become. And if you still can't figure it out, okay, then, you know, it's on you, because the information is right there. And I, somebody told me the other day, they said they don't have time to go and, you know, read and learn all these things that, you know, whatever. And I said, dude, how much time do you spend watching Netflix? You know, how much time do you spend
Just sitting around,
Yeah.
wasting your life.
Yeah. I mean, you're looking at your phone, you know, 20 hours a day. And this person, I know them in my real life. And I told him, I said, you spend 20 hours a day looking at your phone. You don't have time to, you know, to stop playing Mahjong and go, you know what I mean? It's like, I just don't understand it, you know, and I just can't grasp it. And, you know, I'll talk to people and they'll ask me all these questions when I see them. And I'll say, well, do you watch the show? Check out the show. Like, oh, you know what? I just don't have time for that. Well, I don't have time standing here at the grocery store to give you an entire synopsis on everything that's happened or going on. You need to like go and check out the show. And I've even mentioned your show before too. Another one I like is Beyond the
Thank you.
Veil.
Oh, it's a great show.
Yeah.
It's a great show.
Yeah, and Paul Anthony Wallace, The Fifth Kind. That's a good one. I like Jason Bland, Paranormal Soup. There's too many. To Tony Merkel. I mean, there's just, you know, there's so many of them. I have so many friends. Steve Stock, Josh Nogia. I like Mr. Ballin too. If anybody hasn't heard him, except I don't like his play on the like button, like turning it into a personality. You know, like go hide coleslaw in the like button's boots or whatever. I'm like, dude, come on, man, stop trying to be funny. Just tell the stories. You're really good at it, and it's mostly true crime with him. But if I do have time, it's one of you guys, I'll watch you guys. I don't have time to watch all this other nonsense. So if I get a chance, I'll check out you guys, because, you know, I've gotten, like, I'm sitting there when I listen to your show, Rob, I'm sitting there shaking my head the whole time. And me and my wife were talking about that the other day, and she goes, I can tell when you really like someone and their show because you're nodding your head. And I'm like, yeah. And she's very like hip on my body language.
Perceptive.
And she's very,
I
she's very,
appreciate that, man. That's that's amazing. And you know what? It happens like that, though. It happens in a way that I'm trying to put a library together, and I've been tasked with archiving all the information I can get my hands on like that. And that's because on a day-to-day basis, this is the change that we're trying to have, and we're trying to focus that change in the sense of like one-on-one conversations. So when you're in the grocery store, and I got caught in the grocery store the other day, some lady was, you know, asked a question about something. She didn't recognize me, she didn't know me from a hole in the wall, but we got into this amazing conversation, and she was like, I agree with that. And it was about our roots from Catholicism and how some of the practices that are, you know, inherently within Catholicism lead you to wonder what else is out there. What's that more? Where can I keep going from this? And that's sort of where I started. Now, there's a lot that I disagree with in the faith too, and I look back at a lot of these ancient religions, and I think that they're truly trying to grasp the concept of, you know, frequency upgrades and vibrational upgrades in consciousness. And they're using that. And of course, I do believe in a creator and an intelligent design to the entire universe, but there is something that is just, you know, inherently more to be found. And it's not so cut and dry as some people would like to see in, you know, preaching and sermon and things like that. There's a lot more out there. But that's what the aim and goal is, to be that change, right? And I say that all the
Mhm.
time, to be that change, because the information becomes that activation. And when people get that information, it activates them to do it themselves and to kind of go through those initiations of information themselves and really blossom from an understanding and not an understanding. And it comes out in a different way, and it changes lives. It really does. For me, it did. And it was a big redirection for me. But
Yeah, and I think that if somebody would take the time to go and spend an hour listening to you, spend an hour listening to Paul Wallace, spend an hour listening to me, and you could do that. You could go listen to 3 hours a week. You could expand your mind and gain a stronger understanding. And somebody said something to me the other day, and Anthony, I told you it was. They were saying, you know, how am I going to learn something from some guy telling paranormal stories? And I'm like, because we go deeper than just the story.
Yeah.
We don't just talk about the story and be like, well, goodbye. We kind of try to get down and say, hey, what could this be? We know we're not going to come up with all the solid answers, but we can throw some pretty interesting,
Theories.
theories out there and kind of postulate on them. And I know that I was just flipping through. How I found you, Rob, was I was just flipping through YouTube one day, and I just was like, somebody, I guess the algorithm, it showed me, and so I was like, who is this joker over here? Nah, I'm just joking. So I saw you, and I started listening to what you were saying, and immediately my head was bobbing. I was like, yeah, this guy's on the level. This guy, yep, he gets it. He totally gets it. And I liked all of what you were saying, and I said, man, I got to get that guy on the show. And so we connected, and here you are. But the thing I wanted to ask you a couple things, Rob, and you were talking about the Hopi prophecy. Now let's go into that for a minute. Let's just go there for a minute, because there's so much other stuff that me and you could talk all night. But let's focus on that for just a second. Like, how do you think that that's going to come about? Because a lot of people are talking about the rapture, like during this last thing that happened with the pandemic. People were talking about the rapture, and now people are saying this is the rapture. Then they're like, no, there's going to be a rapture. Now, I don't believe in a rapture in the sense that the Scofield Bible preached it, but I do believe that there is a shift happening and coming, and that things are going to change. And I believe that people are going to be moving into another density, and other people are going to stay. How is that going to play out to you, in your words?
okay, so just to start, I'm going to mix a couple of different, I guess, categories here, right? So there's disclosure, which is going to initiate this move towards this next level, right? We're going to see entities that essentially they're going to reveal themselves. I think that 2022 is the year of the truth seeker. 2023 is going to be the year of accountability, where we purge a lot of the archonic evils that are on our planet, and sort of it's gonna bestow upon reality a more of a, I guess, glossy side of things, and a little bit more of a understanding of how we maneuver into the fourth density, into the fifth density. And then the last vestige of that is going to be disclosure, where entities are going to make themselves known in a way that's going to completely change the way we see everything. Just like in history, when you talk about paranormal, back in the days of ancient Greece and ancient Rome, they used to be able to reach the underworld and speak to entities, and really, really conglomerate with them to get how the future is going to play out, or the gods have been around forever. Those entities are going to somewhat come back and kind of give us this archive of knowledge that's on this planet. There is a arc. This is an arc planet, so every genetical code that resides out in the cosmos is on this planet. It's been saved here. Now the people on Earth are going to get more of an access into that grid, or that energy field. Right now, Earth exists on four different levels. There's the third dimensional Earth, there's fifth dimensional Terra, which is future Earth, and then there's even future Earth, which is Gaia, and we talk about Gaia a lot. And then there's the 10th, 11th, and 12th dimensional Earth, which is the auric Earth. So just like us, we are residing on every dimensional frequency that there is, 1 through 12, and probably more into the cosmic consciousness. So we're going to act with the engaging of these extraterrestrials or entities, whatever they may be, ultra dimensional, extra dimensional, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to come down the line that they're going to give us this vast ability to connect with the archive on this planet. And it's going to enhance humanity to a point where computers are not going to be needed anymore. There's going to be telepathic communication. We're going to raise our frequency to such a vibration that will be probably within the somewhere between the 5th and 7th density. We may even lose all physical reality. It may just be ether at that point. But we're going to move towards that by the community understanding and these deceptions kind of shedding these programs that have been instilled in us since birth, right? These programs that we have are even in our subconscious. And I've done a lot of work to root these programs out of my subconscious. It's even a reactionary thought process. Somebody slaps you across the face, the first thing you want to do is turn around and punch them in the face.
Yeah.
And not question the fact of why did they just punch me, or was it something maybe that I did, or there's reactive programming within us, and we can shed that, and that's going to help us achieve that higher vibratory state. But again, I also use meditation. There's different ways to go about it, and I think that once we get to this enlightened point, there is going to be some sort of, we're in a spiritual war, as they call it now. And that's going to be the shedding of the dark essence of that's been on our planet for a long time, and it's going to kind of thrust us into a galactical playing field when we're now just on an earthly playing field, and that's also going to give us a lot of ability to basically ascend.
Yeah, and move into now. I want to add to what you're saying and kind of explain some things. What Rob is talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, you're talking about moving from this density into a higher vibrational density, becoming a spirit virtually without body, which is our true essence. That's our true form.
Yes.
And people
Yes.
think that we're evolving into a spirit. Really and truly, you're just returning home. And I tell people all the time, I was like, if you think that this is what you are, you're not aware of the nature of our reality. And the nature of our reality is seen, when it is seen through the lens of the spirit, it is completely laid bare, unlike what's going on now. Now, when you said future Earth, let me explain that. Now, what he's talking about is time doesn't really exist. And I know that's hard to wrap around, because to us, time flows like a river. You know what I mean?
A day to a planet is just nothing.
Yeah, well,
comparatively.
all things exist at all times
Yeah.
at the same time. There's just no, and so whatever you do, when people say, well, this reverberates throughout, that's the truth. It just keeps going. It doesn't end. It's always there and in one giant loop. Well, one of the things that people don't understand is that future Earth is already there. Past Earth is already there. We're already it's all happening at the same time, and there's multiple levels all functioning like a clock, and people don't grasp that. And now I could even attest to the fact that I've seen this in the spirit world, but when I come back to this physical body, it's still, I cannot relay or convey to you what it looks like. It's like something that just is.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't explain it, and I don't think that God meant for us to be able to explain it. It's something for him to handle, not us. But I do believe in what you're saying about the ascension and everything else, because every holy book on earth, every book of every religion says that that's what's happening, that we're going to ascend, and every book talks about these things. And it's really, really mind-blowing when you look at these books. They were all written thousands of years ago, and they all kind of coincide with the same message. And another thing I think that is so sad that is happening right now is that people don't realize how ancient and how old culture really is. They think that, the world is 5,000 years old. Some people believe that it's only 5,000 years old, or they actually believe that we're 10,000 years old, or some other ridiculous, when I'm telling people that we've had civilization for millions of years that have risen and fallen, risen and fallen, risen and fallen. And there's no record of it. Some of these past cycles were so long ago that there's no record of it. And you won't find any record of it. And it's not meant to be found. But and another thing too, when you're talking about the arc, and this is an arc planet, you're very right about that, because I've studied natural, like biology. And when you look at the nature of our nature, like out in nature, there are many things that make you go, what is this? Like okay, for example, we were talking about alien life forms, the praying mantis. Take that creature, for example. There are multiple stories. We've even done a show on praying mantis creatures, like these beings that are like these 7-8 foot tall. They look like a praying mantis. If you took a praying mantis and you held it up to a child and said, what does this being look like? It's going to point at this. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And then you have these wolf-like creatures that they look like a wolf. And so I think that what's going on here is that this planet has spawned multiple generations of different types of beings and entities, whether you want to call them ultra-terrestrial, ultra-dimensional, whatever, interdimensional, interterrestrial, whatever. And I think that what's happened is they've all sort of, and I don't want to say evolved because then people flip out, but I'm talking about they really did. They kind of evolved here from different species, just like the reptilians. There's multiple types of reptilians. And so when you put it all together, there's kind of this big soup that's here on this planet, where most planets have a homogeneous species. We have like this large variety that came from multiple sources. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I saying it
Absolutely.
correctly, Rob? I don't know if I'm saying
No,
it
you
correctly.
definitely are. Just to piggyback off what you're saying, we have the lions, and the lions are from look like the entities that now reside in Lyra, right? We have a tremendous amount of otherworldly beings out there that are almost whale-like or porpoise-like, and they live in the waters of some of the other planets out there,
Or
and
the
they're
moons, like Europa.
right. That exactly. That's how they paid homage back in the day when ancient civilization and culture were here. The humankind looked to them as and revered them as gods because of their technology. So what the ancient astronaut theory is somewhat true. What you see on TV isn't quite all of it. But what they did is they left their genetical code in ancestors here for us to pay homage to. And that's why the lion and Lyra was the cradle of civilization, they call it, is the king of the jungle, because that's where all of mankind and humankind came from, regardless of race, color, creed, whatever. We all stemmed from the Lyrans, right? And the Lyrans were created from these beings called the Patel, who are seventh dimensional beings who were created by the mother and father. And a lot of religious texts we have now only talk about the father, when there is a complete congruitive balance between male and female. And it's just the way it goes everywhere. There's the yin and the yang. Everything comes in twos, right? So creator beings would also become in twos, I would assume, just because of the way that the rest of the universe plays out. We are the microcosm, and that's the macro, right? So there's a lot there. Absolutely, there's a lot that goes through that. And just to go back to one point you said about how long civilization has been here, there is a metric called the Yuga cycle, which is 26,500 years. And the Yuga cycle is essentially the span of a civilization. Now, every 12,500 years, which is a half of each Yuga cycle, man goes through a tribulation, a life-altering tribulation. And what happens is, after that 12,000 year period, which is what the historians use as their benchmark for the beginnings of ancient Sumerian civilization, man either progresses and we get an Atlantis sort of cycle, or man gets knocked back to the Stone Age and we get ancient Sumeria, where everything comes full circle back to, Stone Age, working our way back up through technology.
Yeah, and when you're talking about the yugas now, you're using a different time, you're using a different time. What is the word?
Length?
Yeah, you're using a different length, I guess. The yugas, now there's 4 yugas in each, and there's the Satra Yuga, the Tetra Yuga, the Dwarpa Yuga, and then the Kali Yuga. And in the Kali Yuga, this is in Hindu culture, we are in the time of the Kali Yuga, of the great destruction. It's also known though as the Great Nothing, where everything just ceases to be, and then it kind of reverberates back into the Satra Yuga. And they believe that Krishna Kalik, who kind of mirrors Christ, that he's going to return and he's going to destroy the bad, set everything balanced correctly. But in that cycle, it's 4,230,000 years, I believe. You can cross-check that, Anthony, see if I'm correct about that. But there is a different time measurement that you're using, and there's some yogis that actually believe that that's not correct, that when it was written that they added too many zeros to it, because that would make the Kali Yuga, which is the shortest Yuga, thank goodness, thank God. The Kali Yuga is supposedly only like 230,000 or I don't know, some ungodly number, but it's like it's huge, and that started 3,500 years ago, which would also kind of coincide with the time of the ending of the Dwarpa Yuga, which is when the flood happened. Now, in the Satra Yuga, the beginning Yuga, people lived to be 100,000 years, and everything was done by the force of will, and morality was almost at 100%. And then you had the Tetra Yuga, where people lived to be 10,000 years, and morality was at 75%, still a pretty good deal. But then you had the Dwarpa Yuga, where morality was cut down to 50%, and you had basically 50-50 whether someone was good or bad, and people only lived to be 1,000 years. And that's what you get in the book of Genesis, is when Methuselah, he was 1,000 years, Noah's grandfather and all that. People were living to be 800 to 1,000 years, and now our lifespan tops out at about 100. We know that if we go beyond 100, our DNA literally begins to just unravel, and we just begin to dissolve, and we're created that way. And so we are in the Kali Yuga, where supposedly it's only 1 in 4 now. And it's like morality is cut down to 25%, because according to the belief, the bull that represents the wheel of Dharma, like his leg is chopped, and then there's only one leg left to stand on. And Brahman actually kind of sort of goes into a hibernation or dies, which to them is a god. People say that they're a polytheistic religion. Well, yes and no. They actually believe that each god is an aspect of that one god. And Clever Conquistador had something he said here on the chat. He said something like, please tell me you're talking about, I think I might have lost it here. He says,
It was proto-Hinduism, right?
yeah, it's basically Hinduism. He says, Clever Conquistador says, please tell me you believe they came from alternate dimensions rather than other planets. I believe both. I believe that there are multiple planets, an infinite amount of planets out there, with an infinite number of realities, and an infinite number of alternatives that can happen. And I think that every single being can create another offshoot of our reality. But it's all happening at the same time, and it resonates at the same time. But eventually there's going to be a major shift coming up pretty soon. And people call it the apocalypse. They say it's the end of time. It's not the end of time, and it is not the apocalypse. Even in the New Testament, Jesus says that it's going to be the beginning of the 1,000-year reign of the new kingdom of Jerusalem that he establishes, basically bringing heaven down to this plane of existence, but we're bringing our vibrational levels up. But 1,000 years in the divine cycle is 1 year is 365 years. So 1,000 years to the divine would be 365,000 years.
A drop in the bucket. It's nothing.
Exactly. So it would be 365,000 years, which would almost round out the Kali Yuga. It'd be 423,000 years, and it's going to go on for 365,000 years. But I believe, like you, where there's going to be two different things going on. Now, I've even heard it said, and I don't know if you believe this or not, but people say, well, and this is kind of deep, and we're in some deep water here, that the evil part of me, let's just take me, for example, the bad side will stay, and the good side will go. And so you'll be split from the yin and the yang. You'll be the good side will move to the higher density, and it'll be like you don't even feel it. It's like a blip. And then the bad side, the bad consciousness, and a lot of people believe that that's basically what hell is, and that when you actually burn in hell, it's a type of hell, and it's burning off the sin or the evil or whatever. And I had a talk with somebody the other day who had a near-death experience, and they were telling me that they saw hell. Well, one of the things that I told them, I said, if the hell is a punishment that's been named by God, you're not going to be being tortured by demons, because they're going to be burning and being punished with you. There's not going to be
Right there with you.
Yeah, they're not going to be torturing you. Now, what that hell is that he saw was him being out of the grace and out of the vibrational balance. And so he was taken to a place where these wicked beings were able to grab his soul and take him there and torture him, where they hold sway. And that is becoming more and more prevalent because they have more and more power. Because as we begin to get toward this shift, the good is kind of waning and the darkness is kind of rising, but that's temporary. And you see that all the time. The bad guys win, but it doesn't last. And then things are set right, and then we move on. But what's happened now, and this is probably not a very popular opinion, but the good guys are continuing to lose. And it's happening to where everybody's jumping on the bandwagon of the bad guys. It's been happening for centuries now.
Oh, yeah.
And then the good guys lose the war, and then they're called the bad guys, and the bad guys are called the good guys. And everybody sits around talking about how great it is that that these bad guys have won and they're in charge, and they pretend like we did a great thing, blah, 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 blah. And it keeps happening. And it keeps happening over and over again. But it's because we're rounding out in this time period called the Kali Yuga. And that is just part of the cycle. We have to go through this pain. You have to endure. And it's also part of your karma. To be here in this time and go through this suffering and this pain is part of your karma. You're here for a reason. Nobody is like going to escape the judgment. It's going to happen, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. All you can do is ride the wave, surf the Kali Yuga, and just basically ride the wave, and just be a part of what's happening, but always know where you stand and be grounded and be prepared, because it can happen at any time. And stop dwelling on and worrying about and worshiping the physical existence, which is a temporary state. People cannot grasp that, and they are so grounded in that. They want to believe that all these creatures or the interdimensional beings are all just a bunch of physical beings that run around, with physical bodies. And it's like, yes, but also no, because that's not correct. We are just like them in the way that we are actually spiritual beings. They are just moving in and out of these portals and these dimensions that we can't access, because we're stuck in this third dimensional.
We don't have the vibratory key to it.
Yes, exactly. They have the vibratory key. Yes.
Just to jump in really quick, I don't mean to cut you off.
No. You go ahead.
What your friend saw is what you're telling me is that hell is not actually hell. It's what's called the void.
Mm-hmm.
And the void is a place where these entities that are called the Azarits live. And the Azarits are, and there's another name for them, but the Azarits are essentially these specific entities that are like archons, very, very similar to where the archons came from.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the ones that essentially, in the very beginning of creation, there was mother and father, and mother and father were a unity consciousness. They were basically playing out like their innermost fantasies within themselves, home, family, white picket fence type things, whatever, civilizations. They were playing it out amongst themselves. And what they didn't realize is that by playing out that sort of role play, they were building up electricity and magnetism. And it became an electromagnetic burst that essentially opened up the universe to life. And this is some of the ancient, not texts, but some of the galactical historians talk about this. And what that does is it creates a rip in the time fabric, or in the the fabric of space and time. And this is where Lucifer is created. If we talk about Lucifer, Lucifer is an incarnation of, he goes throughout all of history. He was there before, he was the offspring of father. Father and mother became very, very close to each other because when that explosion happened, which could be classified the Big Bang in evolution standings, right? So father gets shot across to the other side of the universe and longs for mother, and mother longs for father. So they make their way back to each other. But father was shot so far out across the other side of the universe that he had to build his energy to get back. When he came back into contact with mother, mother was said, "You're too bright. Like I can't do this. It's too crazy. Like you're blinding me." So father discards some of his energy into the void, and that eventually becomes Lucifer. And Lucifer is raised by these archonic demon like entities that reside in the void. That's their home, and then gets thrusted out of the void, and starts all of the war that happens within the sides of the universe. So there's a lot with that, but I believe your friend saw the void because that's where these entities reside, and not so much torture, but they essentially, you know,
They hold
kind of,
sway.
yes, like they
Um,
they 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 re- control the nature of that reality, and there are worlds that reside within that reality now because of the things that we've done with CERN and opening portals, and
the abyss.
there's a lot of stuff there now. It was
Hmm.
very empty before, but now there's a lot, and we're kind of somewhat. Sometimes when we get like all these timelines that are all over the place, and all those parallel realities create more timelines and more offspring of timelines, and it's a mess. It's a mess. So
It
that's
was
kind
never
of what
meant to
happened.
be that way either.
Right. It was meant to be a timeline prime, is what I like to call it.
Hmm.
And timeline prime is really just, where we are kind of right now. And we're seeing a lot of these dark fantasies of these archons play out in society today. And you're right. But the other part I wanted to get to is that a lot of people in the spiritual community believe that we chose to be here right now, right? Your soul or your consciousness is energy. Energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be transferred or transmuted into something else,
Hmm.
but it still is there, right? So when our body, or we take physical form and our consciousness is uploaded into that physical form, that's sort of our choice to be here in this point in time, because there's such a thing as, I believe, as the seven layers of heaven. There is that as well, but there is this consciousness, and we're all fractals, and all of our parallel selves are fractals of our higher self. Our higher self is that focus point that links us directly
The soul
to
matrix.
consciousness or source, right?
Hmm.
And from there, each fractal, like I'm a fractal, you're a fractal, my parallel self is another fractal of that one soul, right? That one consciousness. And we can tap into and see all of those alternate realities with the right meditation styles and focus.
You're right.
And we can learn from their mistakes, especially with our higher self too. But,
Yep.
you know, a lot of people believe that we chose to be here in this time because this fight was going to be so great and it was going to get so crazy that our souls or our consciousness, whatever you call it, decided that they had to be a part of this. And we have a set plan that is essentially predestined before we even get here. And there's no variance of that predestiny because time is not as linear as we believe. And when
No.
you're a part of the consciousness or the grand consciousness or source, you can see thousands of years into the future, thousands of years back. And this is also one of the reasons why we can go back in our own incarnation cycle timeline and see past lives, and we have dreams of that. And it's like there's a whole matrix of it, and it gets really, really deep at that point.
Yeah. Dick Richards says the Mother, Father, Son is the pagan trinity. Well, here's what I'm going to say to that, and I don't totally believe everything that Rob just said. I have to look more into that. But if you look at it from the Gnostic view, now a lot of people don't really understand this. When I say that Satan is the god of this world, Satan is not one being. Satan is a race of beings, the Shaitan, and they are a form or a offspring of these archons. And what when Jesus tells his brother James, and I believe this was in one of the Gnostic texts, I believe it was the, you might want to look this up, Anthony. I think it's called the Apocalypse of James. But anyway, he tells him to flee Jerusalem, for it's full of archons. Jesus is warning him. He's telling him to leave. He doesn't tell him to stay and fight and that you can cast them out in my name, which he does say in the New Testament over and over again. But those are demons. Those are Nephilim. Those are the offspring of the fallen. When it comes to facing the fallen themselves, it is a totally different ball of wax. Those energy entities are, they with enough force behind them, could rip apart space and time and alter, which is what's happening right now, like what you said through CERN, because they're bringing them from the abyss. They opened the abyss, which it talks about in Revelations, and that's what they've done. And there are a lot of different theories about what this is and how it works, and everybody's got their own piece of the puzzle because they have a religion and they believe that that piece of their religion tells them the truth. What you have is essentially a kernel of the truth, and it needs to all be put together to make the whole truth. And what you need to understand is everybody looks at it differently and has a different perspective on it. If we were to all go, all of us here in this room, and then Rob, and we all went and we looked down a well, and we're standing under the sun, and I dropped a pebble, and it went 30 feet down into that water, and it hit and it rippled, we're all going to see something different, depending upon what angle you're at around that circle and what angle you are under the sun. Does that make sense?
It's all about perspective.
Perspective.
And you're absolutely right. It's not, listen, I'm not saying that I'm saying complete truth, or it's all up to perspective. And when I talk about Lucifer, I'm not talking about the religious or Catholic text that talks about Lucifer.
No.
Lucifer is an entity that was one of the first created, and it talks about that in the Bible
In the
too.
Bible,
that Lucifer, the light bringer, was one of the first offspring, but it ends up being that this Lucifer incarnates over and over and over, and is the cause of much harm, grief.
Mhm.
It's essentially a boogeyman, and everybody has to have that boogeyman to kind of make that story to make themselves seem righteous, right? And that's kind of one of the programs that we have when we hear something. And I love that you don't agree with me in some of the things. I think that that's incredible. And I love that, because when we don't agree, we have heartfelt conversations that sort of give us perspective of the
Yeah.
other's understanding. And that
Not
that
an
is
echo chamber.
right. It's priceless. That is priceless. And we're veering so far away from that right now. And that if you don't follow specific guidelines or set terminology or rules, you can't be a part of the conversation. And that is so far beyond, because think about it, like I said before, when we look at these ancient religions, they're all over the world, but they all talk about somewhat similar things from a just slightly different perspective. They're trying to conceptualize something that they've either felt, seen, or heard, and it's really the embodiment of it is completely amazing. And one of the things we use is called comparative mythology. And comparative mythology gives us these figures or these stories about specific persons, and we can take those stories and spread them across the vastness of every civilization on this planet. And we can draw links and connect. Like there's an ancient Sumerian princess who is a goddess eventually named Ayana. And we can find Ayana all the way from ancient Sumer through every civilization, and yet she changes in some stories because of course life happens, and I'm sure she saw people that she was very close with pass on and get angry in certain instances. But we can literally look at her run all the way up to where she's Morgan Le Fay in King Arthur, and then they've even embodied her as the Amazonian in DC Comics as Wonder Woman. Her name is Diana, and the original name is Ayana. And I know what you're saying, that's comic books. Yes, but comic books are a depiction of stories
reality.
that were passed
Yeah.
on. Yep, that were passed on for many generations.
Myths were real.
They had to be
the
good somewhere.
Amazonians were there.
Yeah, well, it talks about it in the Legend of Troy, which we know that Heinrich Schliemann eventually found. He said this is a myth, this is a myth, this is a myth. And Heinrich Schliemann eventually found Troy. He excavated it levels and levels and levels, and he found it. I believe that the demigods actually did partake and fight in the Battle of Troy. I do believe that. And the queen of the Amazonians was actually killed by Achilles. It's pretty brutal, but I'm not going to get into what happened, but he did some things. But, and somebody here says in the chat, I want to read this comment so I can address this. This is another thing. People get it a little bit twisted here. And James Powell says, the talk of Satan's birth is just not right at all. Sorry and no disrespect, but can't get behind that line of thought. And that's totally your right to believe how you want to believe, James. But he never said Satan's birth. What my guest Rob said was Lucifer's birth. Two different things. And when if you look at the Gnostics, they believe that the kingdom of God is found from within, and you have to find it from within before you can go out and find the right fit on the outside. And there is the God that created this world. They called him Yaldabaoth. And I don't know if you know about that, Rob.
I'm not familiar with Yaldabaoth, but I know Yahweh.
Yeah,
and
Yahweh, I believe, is a spinoff of Yaldabaoth. Now, Yaldabaoth, of course, he was born, he considered himself to be alone, and it was almost like a child growing, and he created the universe that we live in. This is not what I'm saying I believe. I'm saying that this is one of the stories in the Gnostic belief, and that Yaldabaoth actually created this world, but it is actually the counterfeit world to a real world. Now, Linda Moulton Howe, one time I was listening to a lecture from her, and she was talking about stargates and things like that. And I was playing Age of Empires, and I was kind of halfway listening. Don't get much time, but if I do, I'm whooping some ass on Age of Empires, bro. I'm on there. I'm cold blooded on there. I was playing. And I was listening to her, and I was like going, "What? That's crazy!" And I just remember her talking about the stargates and all this other stuff. And she was saying that our world was from another universe, that it was spun off. Somebody had told her this, right? And that they had meditated on it, and they believed that it was spun off, but it was actually in that reality only 40 years had passed. Where in our reality, it was like 40 or 4 billion years or some crazy number, because ours was going super fast compared to their time. So there was this group of scientists that had created it. That doesn't preclude that there was a creator God that's the Almighty, the one most high. That doesn't say that he doesn't exist, or that he had a son that was called the Savior, which was Christ. I believe that he sent the Holy Spirit and Christ to pull us out of this time, the Kali Yuga. But one of the things, that I was listening to that, and I was thinking that makes sense, that we could have been like the experiment of something, and that's why God had to send Christ, because we were so warped and not in the know, and we were so backwards, because they did this. And that I actually took it a step further. I started dwelling on it and thinking about it, and I thought maybe that's why the map looks totally different now, because CERN moved the continents. Now that sounds crazy, but if you were to rewind the Earth, well, not to me and you, but to the average person is going to go, what? If you rewind the Earth, okay, and you go back millions of years, whatever, I remember South America was just below North America. Now, here's North America, and here's South America way over here, and Africa is this humongous place, 4 or 5 times bigger than I remember it being. The map of Texas looks totally different, and I used to be really good in geography. Everything has changed. The map is different. Australia is like right abutting up against Asia. It's not even the land down under anymore. The land down under, it was way down there, and now it's way up here, and it's basically running into, Micronesia, Malaysia, all that. And you're like, what in the heck is going on here? I'm looking at these maps. I'm going like, this is not how I remember it. But
the coordinates are a little messed up. It's shifted. It's shifted. I distinctly remember exactly what you're talking about now that you're saying it. It's like, that's insane. It's insane to think about that.
Maybe they
but
did that.
But there's also the stories of Anunnaki too, and the Anunnaki made man as per the ancient Sumerians. So there's corroborating information with that.
Yeah. And so follow me on this one now and tell me what you think. I think that maybe they did this so they could move those stargates off of the land because they're on specific points on the earth, and now they are all in the ocean. They're no longer on land. So literally, like Crystal Dawn says, false copy reality. Yeah, possibly. And we're living in an offshoot reality where they have managed to hem us in, and we have no way to access those places of power. And we're a people with amnesia, as Graham Hancock is so fond of saying, and everybody wants to attack him for it. And I'm totally 100% with him on that. We are a people who I've been saying this for years, that we have amnesia. We don't know. And so I think that it's all by design what they're doing, and I believe these archons are behind it. And I believe that they are the culprits, and they are major demons that come from the void, this abyss. And I think that they are manipulating these people into doing what they want and to freeing them from their, like so they can just walk among us like it's nothing.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
what NPCs are for.
Mhm.
Those vessels are to hold the archons.
Yes.
And I believe you're right about that with the Stargates too, because the USO sightings have gone tenfold up compared to UFO sighting. Or if there are UFO sightings, they are more so over the ocean and waters. And they're believed to be bases. And just to go back to, when I was interviewing Paul Anthony Wallace, he talked about this African nation that knew that people would be abducted and taken to an underground base. It was common knowledge amongst this tribe.
Yeah.
And what happens is they come back 2, 3, 4 years later. Most of them had been very, very either ill or had some sort of something wrong with them. And they'd come back and they don't really remember all of their time there, but they're grown up. They're a little bit different, and they're completely 100%. They're like 100% revived, and nothing is wrong with them anymore. It's called the Mimiwata tribe, is what it was called, and he talks about it almost in every show because it's such an amazing story.
One of the things you said, Wata, that reminds me of the story of Abraham and Sarawati, because that is the story of Abraham, but it's told in the ancient Sumerian. It goes way back to the ancient Sumerians. People believe that Abraham was an Israelite, and I argued with somebody the other day, and I said no, and I don't even know why I waste my time arguing with people on Facebook, because that's where all the smart brainiacs are, and I'm like, Israel.
Sometimes you can't help it.
You can't. And sometimes I'm just going like, I want to say something so bad. And then I say it, and then everybody goes, it's a big fallout. But I'm like, that story is older than the Old Testament. That story goes beyond the Torah. That story goes back to ancient Samaria. And it was the story of, because Abraham and Sarah, his wife, there was no Israelites. There wasn't. And then the book of Job actually predates Genesis, which is actually an Arabic book. And so people that get their religion from one source, which I believe when the Israelites were in captivity to Persia and then they came back, that's when they wrote all of that, and then they just kind of they borrowed a lot, and you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, it's borrowed heavily, the Bible, or the early Bible, not the New Testament, but, and it says, yes, and Larry Fisher says Abraham is the father of nations. He was not Israelite. No, because the Israelites did not exist. And then when people talk about the Hebrews, well, those were Israelites. No, they weren't. They weren't either. They were Hebron, which was an Egyptian word that meant enemy or outlander, or it wasn't a good thing. It was like you were an invader, you were an outsider, you were whatever. And then they became Hebrews, and they left supposedly during the story of the Exodus, and then they dwelled for 40 years in the desert among the Canaanites, and eventually found the place they were going to be, and blah, blah, blah. Well, there's a lot of historical inaccuracies and things that don't add up. There is no archaeological evidence of the Exodus. I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade, but when you start to go back and look, and then of course there is the story of Enlil, that he actually created the flood because he hated humanity and he wanted to destroy us. And I've even heard it said that this is not what I believe, folks. I'm putting a disclaimer on this, that Jesus was originally the son of Enlil, and he was supposed to fulfill a certain role, but then he left, and when he returned, he was a different guy, and he said, no, I am not, that's not my father. Enlil is not my father. My father, is the God, the Most High God, who was the one that created him and everyone else. He is ultimately the universe and everything in it. He is the one Most High. And so that is one thing that people tend to, and I argue people all the time, read. I tell them to go read. I'm like, dude, read. I'm not asking you to speak 6 languages. I'm not telling you that you should be doing what I'm doing and poring over ancient texts and going and buying ancient manuscripts to decipher. I'm not telling you should do that. Okay? What I'm saying is that you can read these things, though. If you want to learn about something, you need to study. You need to go in full steam and go in and do what you got to do. Read both sides of any conflict. You have to read both sides. I am a leader in every field that I'm in, and I have to do that. When my people have conflict, I have to mediate. Now, ultimately, someone's going to, it's a must. And people are going to be butthurt, but the truth is the truth, and you can't sugarcoat it. You can't water it down, and you have to, put it out there so that people can drink from the water. And I believe that we are called by God to have, and with a higher purpose, to teach people these things. And there's a lot out there that I know you and I talked about this, Rob, off air, but we don't have the privilege to say what we know, because if we do, we could be told, hey, we don't want to, you know what I mean? So we can't get into the full, But I can tell you right now that me and the guy that are on the air right now, we've done a lot of studying between the two of us. We've read a lot, and that's where you get these conclusions. It's not like I just woke up one day and said, oh, you know what? I'm just going to make up a story and I'm just going to put that in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds good.
It sounds good, so I'm just going to run with that. That's not what happened. This is 40 years, of, well, I'm not that old. How would it be? 30 years of research and work.
I'm 40. I'm 41. So
yeah, I'm 40. I'm 47. And so, we're both young guys. We're in our prime, and I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, hell yeah, we are. Hell yeah, we are.
But the thing is, you have all this knowledge, and then when you try to give it to people, they want to reject it outright because it doesn't fit into this parameter that they've created for themselves. Open up that. Go. What is it I always say about your level? Like what, Anthony?
What is it?
What is it that I always say about
perception?
getting out of your comfort zone?
Oh, big time.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's where growth happens.
You never grow as a person if you're comfortable.
You stagnate if you stay in your comfort zone.
And living in an echo chamber doesn't do you any good either. That's why, Rob, I bring you on. Not every guest that comes on my show, I believe everything that they say, but I believe a lot of what you have to say because we've been on the same level. You call it different names and different words, and I call it different names and different words. But in the reality of it, it is the same thing. I mean, I've had people on my show that talk about evolution. I call it adaptation, but it's the same thing. But I tell people everything evolves. Everybody's belief, everybody's opinion, everything that happens, it grows. It goes from being small, and it grows. And people are so scared of that word evolution that they're like, well, that's not correct because it's evolution. How do you think anything grows if it doesn't evolve into something, even yourself, you're slowly evolving through your whole life. You're evolving. And we need to stop being afraid of these trigger words, because religious fanaticism isn't a good thing. Because all religions have answers, but all religions are also wrong. And I tell people that because, like you said, there's a yin and a yang to everything.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I walk a line because I was raised Roman Catholic, and I still believe, I still believe in God and Jesus Christ, but yet I'm in a community that's sort of like, Catholicism is sort of, obsolete at this point. But in a turn, it's not, right? Here's what I tell people all the time, too, is that faith is brought to you by an immutable force, a force that is the universe. You can call it your higher power, whatever you want to call it. There's faith because of, a God figure.
Mm-hmm.
Church is ran by man.
Yep.
Man is fallible all the time. I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Mark Fiorentino. He was a website developer for IBM, and he basically took out code that troubleshot programs in the IBM DOS system. He worked on Einstein's theory of relativity and unified field theory. And essentially what he did was he worked to super relativity and unified field theory, which gives us the ability to travel in space. And he thinks it's like the cutting edge of what's next, right? And I asked him a question during the interview. I said, "What's the one thing that you found that you didn't expect to find?" And he says that the universe is created of ones and zeros, which shows intelligent design.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you take it as you want. Now, to me, that was God. God made those ones and zeros, and that's why everything is so everything is connected. There's connections to everything. And when somebody has like an opposing ideology to me or opposing view, I love it because now I get to absorb all of their information, take what I need to kind of, you know, fill the gaps or the dots. Everybody has those dots, right? When our dots come together, sometimes there's a dot that connects more of my dots from your dots. It's like
Mm-hmm.
a pattern map, right? So I love that. And a lot of people get like hell bent, like, you don't think like I do. That's it. Get out of here. But I love those opposing views because it helps me to grow as a person and to understand why I believe what I believe and why you say what you believe and how either it resonates within me and I can say that's amazing what you just did for me, or I can say, well, maybe I'm not so much on board with that, but it also gives me avenues of which to keep researching. And that's part of that, not staying, not being stagnant, is finding new information and seeing where that information takes you. But it all has to resonate within you, and your body and your consciousness and your discernment will tell you what works for you. And there's nobody on earth who could tell you that you're wrong or right in any situation because perspective is everything. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I tell people that we are the ones that we've been waiting for. When you get that information that activates you, you're going to want to tell others. I think everybody should have their own show on YouTube, speaking their truths in their minds,
Yeah.
because it'll help everybody else to understand. And also, it's a great way to connect with a community. One of the things that I've done is I've built on Telegram a tremendous community that just literally shares information, videos, documents, everything, just all day long. Boop, 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 boop. And it's the most insane thing you've ever seen, but it's one of the greatest chats I'm a part of because it makes me think every day. And the one thing I wake up with saying, how can I better myself today than yesterday? And hopefully that's working towards that evolutionary process. We were highly evolved and then we de-evolved because of stagnant and complacency because we had it all. And now we're back on that evolutionary path and getting back to that spot where we were before.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an incredible um to me it's sad because we only have like so many years in this physical body. But I believe that we come here to teach, to learn, and then to teach and to try to help and to try to do our part. And I had a conversation with an old friend of mine, and he asked me. The conversation was about morality, and we were talking about morality, and it was like, would you? This is a question I wanted to pose to everyone here, and I'm going to ask everybody that's in this room, and I'm going to ask everybody that's out there listening, and even my guest. And this is very important. If you let's say from a Christian or Muslim standpoint, or even the Buddhists, like how they believe, if you were facing eternity, a true eternity, okay, where it would be a reality to where you couldn't escape. Let's put it that way. because eternity is a concept, okay? But let's say that your reality and your perception of that eternity is eternal. We're not going to just say it's not. And it was to go to hell. And you were going to be in hell, and there is no going, you're never going to get out, and it's never going to end, and you're going to be eternally tormented forever. Okay? And I'm being like let's just, it's kind of dark here, but let me ask you this. And you were given the option at the very end, before you went to hell, would you have it in your heart to still do something good and righteous to help like those that you love or that you care about? It's not going to do anything for you. You're still going to go to hell. There's no escape. You're done. You're doomed. There's no way out. And that's absolutely what's going to happen. That, you know, God's not going to change his mind. You're done. Okay. Would you go and do some last good deed that's not going to pay off for you in any shape or form?
Why not?
You have to, I'd say. I mean, that's the whole point of a good deed, is that you're doing it not for reward or anything like that. Like, you're doing it so that you can help someone else selflessly. I mean, I think that's the most important thing. And I don't like people who do good expecting a reward from it. Like, you shouldn't be rewarded for doing good. You should just do good.
Because you're supposed to do it.
Because,
it's the right
it's
thing
not
to
a
do. It adds to
requirement.
the energy.
It's summed up in the Christmas song pretty well. Do good for goodness sake.
Yeah. And that when my friend posed that question to me, and this was, you know, not a recent conversation. This was when we were young and wild and whatever. And he said, I wouldn't. He's like, why? I'm done already. What am I going to get out of it? I'm like, you wouldn't do something good for, you know? And I thought about that question many times, and I was like, yes, absolutely. Even if it meant I'm going to burn in hell and I'm going, you know, I'm done. Why wouldn't I try to save someone else from, you know, and help them in any way I could? That is the question, and you have to really ask yourself that question. And I've asked myself this question too. And I'm not sitting up here trying to be like, oh, I'm a good guy. I'm such a great guy. No, I'm just trying to say that I've asked myself this question before, and I've also asked myself this question, that if everything was stripped from me, everything was taken from me, and I was walking through the streets naked and just starving, and everybody shunned me and threw rotten fruit at me, and I lived like a pariah, and there was no love from anyone on me, and I had to live the absolute rest of my life that way, would I still serve my higher power, which is God? Would I still believe in Christ? And the answer to me is yes. Absolutely yes. And I remember a very low time in my life where it wasn't that bad, but it was pretty bad. It was rough. My vehicle had broken down. I had lost my job. I was sleeping homeless basically, and it was like I just, you know what I did? I got down on my knees and I prayed. And I did it in earnest, and I feel like God touched me in a way that had never been before. And then it happened again later on. You know, it was like he pulls you up from your bootstraps, and he puts you on your feet, and he pushes you to go out into the world and do what needs to be done. And I succeeded. Now, I've fallen on my face a few times since then. Pride comes before the fall. You think everything's great, and then, you know, everything
It's
comes
part of
apart.
the journey, man.
It's part
It's
of the
part of the
journey.
journey. And
Yeah.
of course, you wouldn't enjoy the great times as much as you do without seeing those lowest points or darkest
yeah.
times. It's a cycle, and I've done the same thing. And the first thing that I thought of when you asked that question was, if I have to spend eternity in hell, does everybody else get to either go to heaven or stay in a place that's not hell? Sort of sacrificial of myself. And that's kind of how I feel. Kind of what my mission is right now, is being out on the front line, bringing some of these things that I know to people, when knowing a lot of it is not going to be truly absorbed at first round. But I don't care about being in the trenches and taking hand grenades, as long as the generations after us get to, get to a place of self, self liberation, as I am now. And
Mhm.
for a long time in my life, I was very not on the side of my higher power. I was like, why does this man hate me so much? That's how tough it was getting. And then it was a bad point. And now I look back in those times, and I was never without. I just distanced myself. It was me doing that, not my higher power not being there for me. And then when I found that, like that line back to saying, you know what, God does love me, and He does have great plans for me, and I had to see some things to really be able to highlight the light side of things, because the darkest days are behind us, really. And that's, for myself, and from here on out it's nothing but helping and really trying to get people to understand what's really happening around them. Is kind of deciphering their reality. And I I if I had to take the sacrifice point away from it, I would still do that good deed, because my philosophy now is it's almost as if karma is always on point. And everything that I do or I put into the universe, I hopefully will get back. Maybe not, but at least I tried, right?
Yeah. And I was looking at it from a standpoint of, even if you're not getting anything back, you're done, I would still do it because I have love. And now when
Yep.
you can look at yourself and you know that there's love in your heart for humanity and for God and for the world and nature and the universe, when you have that love, Jesus says it covers a multitude of sins. And I believe that. And I know that I would still do it. I would still do it because that is the right thing to do. I know I was like you. I was on the highway to hell, and I was basically like not a good guy. I never lost love for God, but I was very angry toward man, and I despised humans, and I had very little love or respect or care for them. When something happened to someone, I was just kind of like, well, you had it coming. It's on you. And it was like, well, if I beat you up, then that's what you get. That's because you got in my way, and karma put you there, and you got punished, whatever. So I'd make excuses for my bad behavior, and I look back on it now, and I am legitimately sorry for a lot of things that I couldn't even be sorry for even a few years ago. But time with my wife, and then we had a long conversation. I know, Anthony, we went and we recorded with my cousin Trey, and y'all were all harping on me about how I should feel bad for the things that I did when I was younger. And I was like, yes, but I still at that point in time could not totally feel bad because some of those people were so evil. They were just so evil that it was like, how could I feel bad for these people? Because some of them, like, they're in prison and they are just very awful people. I mean, very bad. And now I look at it and I'm like, well, what if, they have changed their lives too? My friend Dark Waters basically told me, that he had a long-standing feud with an individual that I used to deal with, and he told me one day, he says, you should forgive him. And I said, I've already forgiven him. I just don't forget, and I'm not. And he said, nah, dude, don't even, just let it go. He's like, I'm done with that. He's like, and that person is what they are. He goes, but pray for them, and God will deal with them because you're praying for them. And he's right. And I just was like, you know what? You're right. Why let it fester and be angry for the person? They deceive and they do what they do. But
It only hurts you at that
yeah, it
point.
only hurts you if you just keep it going because it's not really, they don't care.
I mean, I didn't
Right.
think that you should necessarily feel bad for committing violent acts against atrocious, wicked people. It's a little bit deeper than that. I think that you should kind of what you should or should have repented for is the enjoyment of violence in and of itself, because like from what you've told me that in your past, like yes, you would punish like these vile people who did horrible things to innocent, defenseless people, um, but that it just kind of happened that way. Like the reason you and them had an encounter wasn't necessarily because they were wicked people. It was it just they happened to turn out that they were that way already. I'm sorry, excuse me. Um, and but like you would have crushed them either way just because they got in your way, you know. Um, and I said, well, you shouldn't. enjoy the act of violence just simply for the in and
For
of
the sake
itself.
of it,
Yeah,
yeah.
for the
Yeah.
violence for the
Which I
sake of
did.
violence.
The feeling
Yeah.
itself that it brings you shouldn't
Like
be joy. Yeah.
it should be viewed as something that's necessary to protect those who can't defend themselves. It should be like a job, like a duty, but not something you take pride
Well,
in.
and it ultimately it did benefit and help people, but I wasn't doing it from that.
Yeah,
It just
exactly.
happened to fall that way. I was just doing it because I was doing what I do, being what I was, but it just happened to fall that they were very bad people, that got in the way and did what they did, and then they got what they were. A lot of people would come to me and be like, "Oh man, you taught that guy a lesson. He needed it. He was this. He was that. He did all these bad things." And I'm like, "I just did it because you made me mad." But that's not. I wasn't being a hero. I was just being me. Cooper Young says that he says, I think these Archon types can look like people and they aren't even redeemable. Absolutely believe that. I argued with someone the other day, Rob, and this guy said, was a female actually, and she said, that's not true. That everybody is redeemable. And I'm like, yes, everyone is redeemable if they are a true person. But some of these people, I think, are just come back to be vessels for evil and for these archons, and I believe that sociopaths, they are born without beyond redemption because they themselves are incapable of feeling love, and they are incapable of asking for forgiveness. That'll never happen. So therefore, they are literally born from Jump Street. They're born not. They're not gonna. They're never. There's no chance for them. Now, if they do repent,
Yeah.
then they weren't born that way. You see what I'm saying?
Of course, of course. I believe that these vessels that hold the archons are like driverless cars. They're just vessels. They don't have the same soul as people who are either, I don't know. I don't know what makes them with or without the soul. I'm not really sure about that, so I'm not going to pontificate that position. But they are not truly the energies that we see that are, Dolores Cannon says that a lot of people who are out there are not the main character, right? They're basically, the best supporting actors.
Mm-hmm.
They're not real. They're real in the sense that they are a vessel, but they don't have the same contents as some of the other people do. And I think that they're bred for that specific purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And these archons can be a lot of different people, even probably people you know and love. And it's really scary to think about that. Or there's this thing in the community of spirituality called a walk-in.
Oh
And
yeah.
a walk-in is essentially a person or a physical person whose soul is so damaged that, background people, that's what Dolores Cannon called them. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. So what happens is the soul leaves that body and another soul comes in and either rehabilitates the body and sometimes this happens during NDEs. People come back and they're totally different, not the same. So there is some sort of energetic flux that's happening back that way. Now, the archons, they're on a different karmatic board than we are, right? So
Mhm.
to say that they're redeemable is not within their nature. They're not here to do acts of kindness and express love. They are on a different checkerboard. So they would have to basically lose their archonicness and reincarnate on the right checkerboard, right? The humankind checkerboard. They don't live by the same rules as we do. Their their karmatic structure is I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, then I'm going to do it. Now I've satisfied my higher power. And that's what
Mhm.
the archons say. They have a different higher power, whether you want to call it Satan,
Yeah.
Lucifer, whatever it is.
Well,
They have a different structure to it all.
when they go up there and they say, I want to thank God for this award. Well, yeah, you're thanking God. You're thanking your God.
Exactly.
Like when Jesus says, he says, your God is not my God. He's like, my God is the one true living God. And your God is Shaitan, and you're of the synagogue of Shaitan. That's, he basically says it. You're of Satan, and you're of the synagogue of Satan. And he's telling the Pharisees, he's like, your father is not my father. And I believe that when he came back from the Silk Road, his journey on the Silk Road, which I have kicked around the idea of doing some deep diving research into that and finding some evidence, some clues, and trying to put together something about that. Maybe doing a series of shows. I don't know what it would be. I got so many projects I want to work on. But Rob, you're definitely somebody that I'm interested in. You're very intriguing, and I enjoyed you coming on. And I'm going to let you run, but we will talk again, my friend. And if you want, I can come on your show and we can do this. And we can
Yes.
talk some Dogman. We can talk whatever you want to talk. We can do some more work together next time. We'll talk
I would
about
love
that
that.
Yowie. You are a very interesting person, and it's hard to just talk to you for like a little bit of time because there's so much. It's like Paul Wallace or any of my other friends. You guys, we can talk forever. I can just go and go. We can talk, because you guys you got so much to talk about. When I talked to Barton Nunley, he's one of my best friends in this field. My wife's like, "Oh God, you're going to be talking 2 or 3 hours," and we'll just talk and talk and talk. Same thing with Steve Stockton. We just talk and talk because there's so much to say,
Absolutely. I just want to say it's an honor and a privilege to be here, and I really, really appreciate you. And of course, I would love to have you come on the show, and we're gonna rock that out too. I really enjoyed myself tonight, and thank you to the audience for who's out there and listened, and kind of gave us the room to speak without getting too mad at us, right? But I appreciate all of you, and I love everybody. So thank you all so much for the support, and giving me the chance to be here is really incredible.
And another thing too. My friend David Weatherly, we when we talk, we always joke around and stuff. And one of the things he said to me, I'll always remember. He says, "Just because you can, don't mean you should." But you have a very good voice.
Oh, thank you.
And I've listened to some people, and I'm like, man, I like what they're saying, but they're talking like this, and I'm going like, oh God, I cannot do this. I cannot do this. But when I listen to you, I was like, man, this guy's voice just draws you in. You have a very good voice, and I believe that if you just keep doing what you're doing, the sky's the limit for you, my friend.
Oh, thank you, bro. I hope so. I appreciate that, but I hope so. I hope we reach as many people as possible. That's truly
Yeah.
my goal, is to just give out that archived information. And I'm working on a lot of new projects in the background that are going to make all of the information that I've been collecting, right at your fingertips. And it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Rob Yox, we have the Full Spectrum Universe up there, how you can find him, reach him. Reach out to this guy, man, and you might learn something. You may learn something unless you're just a vessel for an archon, then probably not. But, but Rob, it was an honor to have you on. Thank you for coming on. You have a good night, man, and a good new year.
Thank you. You too. Be blessed, my friend.
You too. All right, bye.
Bye.
So, folks, that was Rob Yox. Always enjoy talking to Rob, messaging him, talking to him, whatever. He's a very, very, very smart guy. Knows his stuff. Now, not everything he says you're going to believe or understand. Rob is on a different level. And when I talk to him, it's like some of my other colleagues, like there's certain colleagues you talk about certain things with, and he's one of those people that we go really deep. We go into the deep water. As my friend Darkwater says, you got to put the floaties on. Some people, they have to have those because they can't be in that deep water. But that is essentially when you go really, really deep, sometimes you end up just looking in. It's an inner, perspective, and it just becomes like you're looking at yourself. And that's really what the journey, I think, leads us to, is to look at ourselves and be like, hey, am I where I'm supposed to be? And the kingdom of God, like I said, is found within. You can't find it out in the world or show anyone out in the world until you find it within yourself. And find that life and breath and spark of God that's within all of us. Because you're given the ability to create. We all are. It's what you do and how you do it. But there, like he said, there are really people out there that are just, you see them walking around. I mean, like, we've seen them. They're like, just muttering to themselves, and there's just like this. They're not. You can't communicate with them. You can't deal with them. And then there's absolute sociopaths. I know Anthony and Tony. I know Tony. You probably remember this guy's name started with an A. We used to work with.
Hmm.
Do you remember him? I don't know. It might be before. Was it before his time?
I'm not sure.
Hey, guy. I'm right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I know him. I've never met
Yeah,
him.
you
Yeah.
didn't have to deal with him.
Yeah, that was before.
This
Tony's time.
guy would literally wave the Bible around and talk about God is on his side, and he would do the most outlandish, most wicked things. He would keep people's money,
Mhm.
cheat people, screw you around on your taxes even. You know, I mean, the guy is he was an incredibly evil man who I don't even know, and it was so weird. I don't know if he realized how far away he was. You know, like he was so bad. And who am I to judge? But there are certain people. I mean, you don't have to look at
Well-
like a snake, a cobra,
I mean, you
and
are
know that
someone-
it's going to bite you. You know?
you are someone to judge if you're not guilty of that same sin. That's what people don't get about that judge not lest ye be judged verse. They don't read the second half that explains exactly what that means.
Mhm.
That they just say judge not like a parrot. Judge
Well,
not,
that's
judge
the
not.
thing is, though, I was guilty of some of the same, but not on the level that this guy was. Never, ever have I not paid people. Never, ever have I not paid my debts. Kept money because I thought that I deserved it more than someone else did. And this guy does it all the time. And now this past Christmas, we were actually shopping for Alex's Christmas present, and we ran into one of his former employees.
Yeah,
Who was a good guy. We've known him for years.
aka victims.
Yeah, one of his, and he said that he had ripped him off for $16,000, and I'm like, dude, I just, how can you with a straight conscience sit there and do that to somebody's money? And people say weird things like, well, money's not everything. Yeah, but when you put that work in,
Hmm.
that money, he has children, he has a wife, he has car payments, he has house payments. How can you do that to that person? And this guy ends up in the street, you know, for months because of this guy doing that to him while he's living in his house and he's over there reading the Bible and praying and going to church. That right there is the worst, because if you're masquerading as something good and you were the most vile thing, you know, there is hell for you. I'm sorry, but it's going to happen. Whether it's, you know, eternal is up for debate, but you can end up in the hell realm, and it's you have no one to blame but yourself.
Well, I mean, it's just, I think it's like the same thing about if you, like we said, talked about earlier, do good for the sake of reward instead of for the sake of goodness.
Yeah.
It's the
Or
same
to
thing.
avoid punishment.
To
either
avoid
way is
punishment,
bad.
it's like you should not, being good, it should be how you are. It's like it's not an aspect that you should be rewarded for, because it's something that being good is the reward. Is like being that way should be your reward, and there shouldn't be anything that should get you to be that way. And if you're not that way inherently, then you need to look, like you said, inside yourself and figure out what you can change so that you can start doing good for the sake of goodness.
And I was a rough trade when I was working with him in the first few years. I was not. He tried his shenanigans with me, and I ended up with his truck.
Yeah, I mean, because you're not someone to be messed with.
I mean, you know, and so I was like, sign over your truck. And he was like, no. And I said, Scorpion can attest to this. He wouldn't pay him. And Scorpion needed to buy, according to what Scorpion had told me, he's like, look, I need to get medication for my mother. And this guy's keeping my money. And I was like, okay. So I paid him, and then I paid two other guards. One of them ended up working for us for years. And one of them worked for us for, I think, a year or so. And this guy refused to pay them. And so I paid the debts, and I went to him and I said, you're going to pay me this money. And nope. Then I said, okay, you have a truck, sign it over. He said, no, he's not going to sign it over. I persuasively
Spoke him out of that unwise
talked
decision.
to him through physical expression.
Charades.
Yeah.
He got the point, is what
Yes.
you're saying.
Use very persuasive hand gestures.
Yes, much like the Maori that argued with me at the front door about and started screaming, and I was like, you know, oh, that's very cute. An interpretive dance. I'm always into that. And then it led to my interpretation on how I felt of that. Not anything against the Maori culture. I'm just saying this individual was a Maori, and he began to do things, and then I did things, and I guess mine was just a little more on the level of, you know, because that's what you are when I hit you, level. I am not that person anymore, folks. I am not. I had to do something about a month ago to somebody to protect my nephews, but I'm not a person that goes out and looks for it. I haven't even been training much lately, because, I went in there the other day and I was like, dude, everyone in that class, I was just like kicking and punching and people were flying everywhere. And they were like, sir, these children, this is a 6-year-old class. Why are you in here with the 6-year-olds? And I told them, I said, my skills have diminished with my age. So I'm starting over. Next week, it's the 7. Then I'll go up. Eventually, I'll get up to the teenagers and then back to fighting adults. When that happens, I'm good to go.
Well, we're all big
Ultimately
proponents.
leading to beating up the Ninja Turtles and Master Splinter.
We're all big proponents of beating up children, so you don't got to explain it to us.
Wow. In fact, one of them is sitting right here in the studio.
What?
You want to say hi, Leah? You want to come here? Let her come and sit
Oh.
down. Let her, move
didn't know
yourself
you
out of the
were
way.
here.
My goddaughter's here. And so, and sit down because we're talking about him being abusive to children. I remember when you were a kid and how mean he was. This is my goddaughter, Leah, who is Tony's sister. You want to say hi?
Hi.
You got to speak into the mic.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. Now, I remember when you were a kid, I used to buy you G.I. Joes
Yeah.
and Transformers because that's what you were into. You were into that. And
Action
action figures. And this guy, you and him fought like cats and dogs.
Mm-hmm.
It was so bad. Y'all were kind of pitted against each other, though. But I just remember Tony being like a bully.
Damn straight.
But I wouldn't give up.
You
I would
didn't
fight
give up.
back.
You would do stuff too. Like you were a pretty tough kid. And you know what? I
What?
wish we still had videos of you throwing your punches and kicks
I
because
was gonna say because she can kick like a mule.
Yeah.
She
Oh, yeah.
kicks so
Okay.
hard.
Yeah.
She would always kick me, and then I'd be like, "Well, thank God, I'm 7 years older than her, so she can't really hurt me." But like I imagine, like if she was a little closer in age, those kicks would have hurt me so bad.
Uh,
But yeah, she used to practice like 1,000 kicks on a bag all
Yeah,
the
I
time, and she
remember.
would do it.
Yep.
So
so what are you doing now? Are you playing basketball or
she just had a game. She
Yeah,
won.
actually, I won.
you won?
The
Good.
district game.
Oh, a district game, huh? Cool. That's awesome. We need to go check you out. Would you be nervous if we showed up?
No, a lot of people come.
Really? They go watch you?
Yeah.
What if I go out there and start screaming and take my shirt off and throw it and start swinging it around?
That's
Would that-
actually not the worst thing that could happen. Like,
Oh my
people,
god!
people get like ejected from the games all the time.
Oh my god! Really?
So we can beat
Yeah.
up the refs. That's
Where
what
did
you're
so
saying.
they like throw sodas and beer at the refs or
Well,
something?
they yell
or-
at them, and like if it gets to them where they're too annoyed, they're just
Oh,
you're
wow.
out, and they have to go.
Huh?
And that's why there's security guards there, because so then
We're the security guards, though. You
Yeah, we-
forget. So what are they
they're,
gonna do?
they're like cops, though.
She's like, you're not like fake security. They're real security. Yeah. So, folks, that's it for tonight on Paranormal Roundtable, and I hope that you guys enjoyed the show. Rob Yox, he rocks. He's a good guy.
Very insightful,
Very,
man.
very, yeah. He's a good friend of mine. Go check him out. And you got to. Somebody says here, men have upper body strength. That women's strength is in their legs. Well, both.
You squat a lot.
Yeah, you do.
Well,
you
when
do-
she's-
you always had strong legs.
When she was that young, you can't really tell the difference between like really her and any of the other boys her age. But she could kick like crazy, and but like I said, I was 7 years older than her. I was 15 by the time she was kicking me. So like, if it was upper body strength, lower body strength, I was just stronger than her.
I remember one time we went to see the Christmas lights in San Marcos, and you were in the back seat, and you would not stop pulling her hair.
Yeah, it was.
And finally, I caught you. And dude, I remember turning around, and I wanted to smack you so bad, but I know that I would have made your Dow upset, so I was just like, I'm just going to tell Dow what you did when I get back.
And it was exactly like what it was. It was like I was always trying to get one on top of her, and she was always trying to get one on top of me, and it was like we could never just like
Maybe
sit still and
stop.
be.
You still call me Lisa.
Yeah. so it's-
Like it's
well, that's because Grandpa calls you Lisa.
he does not call me Lisa.
He used to call you Lisa, and that's when I
Call you
just took it
Lisa.
over. No, I got it from him.
Well, he's an old man.
Oh, my
No.
God. Yeah, you know better. Well, anyways, folks, I'm going to go spend some time with my godchildren, and from everybody here at Paranormal Roundtable, myself, Anthony, my nephew, my goddaughter Leah, my godson Tony, my godson Alec. Good night.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for everyone that donated. Fat Squatch, Aaron Shaw, T. Cutler, Paul Deal, everybody. Thank you, everyone that donated. We appreciate it. It's greatly appreciated, and it big time helps keep the show going. Thank you so much. Pray for us, or pray for you.